Namaste, everybody. Those that are joining late, those that are joining early, those that are coming retrospectively. We've got a treat for you guys this evening. A real treat, I believe. It's something that's really has been spoken about extensively on various different platforms, but I think you're generally going to get the same sort of generic kind of information, which is what the web is exploding with. We're hopefully going to take it into a more organic conversation and look at some of the more deep occult notions attached to the eighth sphere, which is essentially connected to this paradigm, this matrix between the moon and Saturn, which we can see echoing through all the occult traditions. I've got a really lovely team to get us kicking off. Chris Miner will be joining us shortly. Just starting as we go around the table, I'll introduce the people. I'm the BushWhisperer. I'm a local shaman here in Cape Town. I've been doing my thing for a while, many years. We've got Noble Intent here. He's a solid practitioner. He's practicing the Vedic path at the moment, but he's got backgrounds in Western cosmological practices coming from the Western schools of occult therapeutics. You know, they already stem from the Rosicrucian tradition, don't they? And so he's got an Eastern and West sort of mindset, also a great researcher and solid brother. It's an honor to have you, dear Noble Intent. We've also got Silas Speaks, also once again, someone with an open mind. I believe you're practicing Dhyana yoga. Is that right, Silas?
No, I'm not. But that sounds like something meditation. I should be practicing. I am practicing meditation, but just... I guess not any specific one. my own one.
Dhyana is just a Vedic name for it, but that's really what we're talking about.
Right? Preference, right?
Yeah, concentration, developing focus. So we've got Silas. He's a researcher. He's a podcaster. If you've seen his channel, Silas Speaks, at Silas Speaks YouTube, you'll find him. A lot of really great content. He's done a lot of research into various different occult fraternities, what's going on in the world, and also breaking down symbolic studies as well. So yeah, welcome, dear brothers, to the show, and welcome to the people in the chat. Vincent, I see you in the house. Come on, I see you in the house. Welcome, namaste. Big love to everybody, and do you please, gentlemen, say a few words about yourselves, where you can be found, your ting. Oh.
Hey, thank you. Appreciate it, Franklin. Silas, I was wondering, were you getting the echo from BushWhisperer?
No, actually, all of the audio seems to be absolutely perfect for me on my end.
I'm gonna duck out, guys, and I'm gonna jump back in. I'm getting a big echo.
Okay, no problem.
If you've got a YouTube tab open in the background, that could be the one that does it, by the way. Sometimes I've done that. YouTube tab in the background. It will screw you up. You won't know what's going on. It's just you got two instances. Big love, brother.
Got it. Figured it out. Okay, so that should give a good introduction to me and technology, right? So yes, I figured it out. Thank you for the advice there. So wonderful to be with you guys. I'm in blessed company here. Every time I interact with you, whether it's in a telegram or in a live chat like this, I learned something. Hopefully we can come together and solve all the world's problems. So looking forward to it.
It's always fascinating, these live streams and these discussions, and I think we have a superb topic tonight, I think we're going to chart new ground.
Well, let's get cranking straight into it. Brothers, sisters, ladies, gentlemen, humans, non-humans, whatever you are out there, let's roll with it. So we're going to be talking about the Saturn-Moon matrix. We're going to be looking at it from a macrocosmic, worldly perspective. What is going on in our world? What are the brass tacks receipts that we can pull, that we can see on the proverbial stage of life? The political fraternities, the financial fraternities, the educational fraternities, those fraternities that manage all sorts of other nonsense like water sanitation, for example, weather modification, the works. And then, of course, the most fundamental, primeval one of the lot, education, learning, school, What is the difference between those three concepts and terms, and why are we being schooled with education instead of learning? So these are all sort of part and parcel of this fundamental discussion, which is this Saturn-Moon matrix. We'll start on the most fundamental level, I think, possibly, if you guys think, like, what does that represent to us in the world on a worldly level in terms of what we deal with on a day-to-day gram scale stage? What do you guys think?
If you want to begin, Noble, then I'll jump in.
I defer to you, my friend.
Well, in terms of the Saturn-Moon matrix, the way I view it, and again, there are different, the way that it originated in the various authors that have written about it, and of course, even the idea of the Saturn-Moon matrix goes back to the zodiac with the axis between Cancer and Capricorn, and of course, it reaches back to Kabbalah as well, which, of course, Kabbalah, by the Zohar's own admission, is termed the three columns system. That's another name for it. So obviously the three columns, as we see in the Moon Tarot card, are the two columns of Boaz and Yakin, which symbolize the sort of dualistic paradigm of our world that keeps us in this sort of checkerboard black and white system. And then beyond that, following the yellow brick road, as we see on the Moon Tarot card, is Saturn. So in essence, if we were to defer to pop culture for an answer, then within the Matrix movie, it would the moon would be the regulator of the system, the regulator of choices, the regulator of the tides of time. But she's not necessarily the author of that system, the author of the matrix of time, and the sort of spatial domain of the temporal. She is merely the an actor, if you will, of the will of Saturn upon the world stage. So she is, if you will, the oracle, the mother of the matrix. Saturn would be the father of the matrix. But Saturn itself, though it is malefic, and it's the you could say that is the malefic aspect of the solar deity, of the sun, of that solar clock in the sky, it is not necessarily purely malefic in the sense that it just seeks to, it's totally of a negative aspect. I think Saturn as a structure is an oppressive structure, as a monster, if you will. It is almost beckoning us to confront it. Those that can confront the structure is there to be seen, remember. Those that can confront that structure and overcome it, I think that is the way that one transcends the bounds. So in a way, Saturn, though he is the warden, if you will, of the prison, he's also the guide, the hermit, that guides one on the path towards spiritual rejuvenation, I guess you could call it.
I think that's a beautiful introduction, Silas. Appreciate it. I was brushing up on the numbers, just took a look. I seem to recall in my studies in the past that there's we could draw a correlation between the orbit or the cycle of Saturn around the sun and the cycle of the moon around the earth. And so I think that's too close to be a coincidence, right? So when we look at the Saturn, it's 29.4 Earth years to go around and orbit the sun. When we look at the moon, although we often equate it to 28 days, or the sidereal, I guess looking at it through that lens, it would be just under 28. When we look at the synodic month, or the month from new moon to new moon, it's 29.5 days. So you've got roughly 29.5 Earth years for Saturn to make one cycle around the Earth. And then, of course, the moon, which is also important to the reality that we're all experiencing on this plane, is, 29.5 days. Can't help but draw our attention to that, if not to discuss it now at some point during our call here.
Yeah, brother. I'm just going to mute your mic while you're not talking because there's a bit of wind behind you. Okay, you did. Love, man. I think that's really on point. I'm busy queuing up the number squares. I've been planning this. I want to throw number squares. You know me. Any opportunity to look at the old number squares and the sigils, let's get them cranked out there because there's like wealth of symbolic information to be uncovered when we look at these number squares. And I think you guys are both on point, you know. I think the lunar connection with the Saturn is profound. I'm going to read a quote from Rudolf Steiner in a little while when we get into the occult side of the story, because it's going to be quite powerfully enlightening. Obviously, this is in alignment with Blavatsky, which comes from Rosicrucianism, but you see similar ideas hatching in the Vedic school of thought as well, with Shani, you know, the Lord of Time. To begin with, I would say, to just throw this out there, when we look at the Hermetic principles, Namaste Mexico, lovely to see you as always. When we look at the Hermetic principles, you'll always hear in Hermetic writings, they're talking about the lords of rhythm. The lords of rhythm, the Lord of rhythm. This is Saturn. Saturn regulates rhythm. Rhythm is time. So the regulating effect of Saturn is time, right? But who maps the time for us that is regulated by Saturn? That is the moon. So there's this really powerful relationship between the moon and Saturn. Saturn may be the lord of rhythm, but the moon is the lord of cycles. So when we look at the cycles governed by the moon, but those cycles are part of rhythm's continuity and part of rhythm's infrastructure. So you could think of the moon as being like little sections, subsections of Saturn's body, if you want to consider it as such. There's this very powerful resonance between the moon and between Saturn. You'll see when we get into the number squares and the enneagram, the moon and Saturn are like, they've got their claws embedded into the numerology, into the innate, so powerfully. And we always think of the moon as representing the feminine. But I'm going to put this out there that, like, the way that I understand the lunar frequencies, yes, it's got a very powerful feminine current. It puts us in tune with that principle of sublimation. So when we are practicing a form of sublimation, let's say you take a tarot card. Where's my tarot cards? Okay. Let's say you take a tarot card, right? And you gaze at this tarot card. I've actually got a pack. I thought I was done with this pack because one live I counted it and I counted 77 cards and I was like, oh no, did the bunnies eat one? Did my boy get hold of one? Darn, because these little things, like, you have to pay for them, you know. I've always got a few spare packs. I've got like a whole lot of packs of them. I've got 2 brand new packs I haven't opened yet. Well, one that I've opened but I haven't used yet. And another that I haven't opened and haven't used. I always love tarot packs. So anyway, I bought one for my girlfriend a while ago. So I bought 3. You know, that's how I roll. I like to buy things in 3s. Lucky Jupiterian numerology, right? But if you take like any symbolism, any symbolic, and you allow yourself to dwell on it, and you allow that free association of thought to flow, we call this sublimation. It's one of the it is active and passive sublimation. So this is allowing the free flow of unconscious information to just flow through the consciousness without regulating it. This is one of the pulse rates of the lunar potential, the lunar sphere. Obviously, sublimation of who I am and the currents that are governing me. If you're not using a symbol, you could be the symbol. Your emotions, your consciousness, the actions within your thought wave frequency spectrum could be what you are sublimating. But when we are sublimating, we are going underneath the ocean and we are deep diving like Pisces, the fishes, right? And even though they don't really relate to the moon specifically, they relate to Jupiter specifically, the feminine part of Jupiter being expressed by Pisces. There's this very powerful lunar direction that's being taken, especially with regards to empathy, which is sort of like the moon's bread and butter, you could say. So we've got this lunar potential, which also rules over life and death in the occult. And we've got the Saturnian, which is the lord of rhythm, which regulates the principle of rhythm, where the lunar regulates life and death. It regulates the generation, right? That seventh principle of Hermes, which represents the male and the female coming together, producing the wheels of being born and being unborn, of cells coming into being so that other cells can go out of being. That cycle, which is being directed by life force, is the domain of the moon. The cycles of time that are just the ongoing rhythm that conducts the symphony of vibration, the third principle of rhythm, or a third principle of Hermes, vibration, you could say it manifests as rhythm. And this rhythm that manifests produces the causes and effects that cause the cycles of life and living and dying, which is the moon cycles. Hence, you want to plant seeds, you want to reap, and you're going to look at the moon to tell you when to do it. But when you're reaping, you're the Saturn, you're the reaper. The green man is the old idea of Saturn. So these two are very closely aligned philosophically, as we can see. But let's take a step out of the occult for a moment and let's look at the worldly stage. Education, the shaping of our thoughts, the paradigm of our worldview. I think this is what's under attack. What would you guys say about how the Saturn-Moon matrix is being used by the occult philosophers and the black magicians of the world to shape our worldview, to lock us into this cube so that we can't transcend the cube, the etheric field, and recognize that it is part of a multidimensional spectrum of consciousness that is manifesting here, and being stuck in this etheric cube that just basically looks at matter. And so we've got these ideas of materialism and materialistic attitudes. And I think whenever we're looking at materialistic things, we're looking at Saturn. So how does this lunar Saturn matrix get used by the black magicians to lock us in to this paradigm of worldview that keeps us trapped in a world where we are victim to the cycles of time, rather than when we are actually the engineers of our fates? What do you guys think?
Well, I think it boils down to what you see, for example, within both the Hellenic Chronia and also the Roman Saturnalia, where Saturn, though it's linked to Dispater, which is also known as Pluton or Pluto within the Hellenic mythology and pantheon. So it's associated with the judge of the dead, right? Of course, the idea is that we are in a sort of deathly spiritual captivity, and we're seeking conscious evolution through individuation of the spirit and the soul and such. But within this sort of judgment, there's a capricious nature with Saturn, where, and you see this with the moon as well, of course, but the Saturn also is associated with the cycles, which itself is associated eventually once you get to the end of the cycle. In the Zohar, it'd be the 6th or 7th millennia. Of course, in our daily lives, in the mundane, again, this is the distinction. Both the moon and Saturn are associated with time. The moon is associated with the short-term cycles, the mundane. And of course, Saturn is associated with the celestial, the heavenly, more of that macrocosmic aspect. But if we look at our normal day-to-day, our normal week, when you get to the 6th and 7th days, of course, in the Western idea, then that's when everything gets, all the shackles are let loose, and you give in to your inhibitions, if you will, and you have a mini Saturnalia, if you will, on the Friday, Saturday, even Sunday. People go out, they party, they have fun. They let go of their sort of seriousness that they require throughout the week. It's a similar view within the longer term cycles. So as the Zohar states it, within the 6th millennia and 7th millennia Anno Mundi, this is when we have the reset, well, the gradual dissolution of the world, leading to the Great Reset, where the heaven and the earth are remade anew. So again, this idea of the reset of the simulation. And you even see within the Apocryphon of John too, this is branching into the Gnostic notions, which arguably are connected to Kabbalah, at least philosophically speaking, and in their origin points. The Apocryphon of John mentions that this world we live in is but a similitude, a projection of the higher. What we are seeing is almost the dull facsimile of a heaven that is just out of our grasp, that we're merely seeing the sort of lower density mimicry of. So in that sense, again, we can view it that these cycles themselves are not set in stone. It's just the entire, I guess you could call it, mystery schools have set up their traditions and their philosophies to make it seem as such, so that it essentially it contorts our behavior in such a way that everything becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And in the more mundane aspect of it, of course, Saturn, through the likes of that Saturnalian Cronian spirit, it seeks to inverse all of the natural order. It seeks to tempt us. It seeks to subvert the very being and essence of us. So this, as we go through the rotations, the reincarnations, through the cycles, after each rotation, we lose more and more of that connection to the source. Funnily enough, I watched a movie recently with my fiance at the cinema called Until Dawn, and I was absolutely, flabbergasted, because it's exactly this notion where they they die within this sort of time warp, if you will, where it's a simulation. It's almost like a hellscape, and after each time they die and are reborn, the hellscape becomes more and more nightmarish. And they look in the guest book, of course, and no one has reached past, I believe it's 12 sort of rotations of this, reincarnations of this. So the more and more that they go through these repetitions, reincarnations, after each death, they essentially lose themselves to the hellscape. They become the Wendigo, the husk. And even Kabbalah has this notion too of the klippah or the kliphot, the literal, the shells, the husks. So there is, it's interesting. I found that a very interesting notion within that, within the deeper symbolism, pardon, of that movie. And of course, that links to the World Tarot card and Cassiopeia. And Cassiopeia, like the moon, goes through a cycle. Biannually, it flips 180 degrees, and she is chained to the throne, and all of this. So it's the same idea. It's the it's basically the turning of the hourglass, if you will, which itself is the figure of 8, and the 8 itself is linked to the various phases of the moon. The gibbous, waxing, waning, gibbous, and phases. So again, you can map that as 8. This links to, of course, the dinghier, which is the Sumerian symbol of the gods. And again, you can go all the way through it. The Templars had a cross which was cryptographic, or cryptically rather, an 8-rayed star. So it's absolutely everywhere. The symbolism, it's written into the fabric of reality itself. When the full moon is upon us, there appears to be, you notice a greater instance of violence and crime, and this is where this term lunacy comes from. And even with the idea of sin, the Sumerian deity of the moon, who was male, funnily enough, and this links to Abraham and his father Terah, who was most likely a high priest of this moon god Sin, or Shin. So funnily enough, this idea that we're born in sin. The wages of sin are death. And of course, the moon as well is linked with the waters, because it's feminine. It's a recipient, if you will, a receptive, and a limiting force, a force of gestation. You notice that all of the various financial terminology and even legal terminology, the maritime legal terminology, is all linked to the idea of the feminine and the waters, the moon, all of that, liquidity, solvency, currency, you name it, monetary, moonitary, moony. You know, it's endless, really. So there is a connection there. It seems that there is a mystery school that believe this wholeheartedly. And if they rule the world, perhaps they're tapping into something that may be tangible, may be there. It may be actually written into the fabric of the simulation.
Wow. Yes, beautiful. A beautiful table full of tidbits, flavors, lots of things to think about, and all very much on point, all very much central to the story that we're talking about. And, you know, what you're saying about it's very interesting. We talk about this Maritime story. Maritime is Mercury. Mercury is the center of everything. You look at the Saturn square, the center of Saturn square is Mercury. I'll bring this up just now. But before we jump onto that, the squares, because then we're going to see why the Maritime is so important, because it's that ignition between the stagnancy. You see, time and rhythm. Think about what rhythm represents, right? 4 brings things into completion. It stabilizes and brings things to the stable point of rest. But 8 represents the movement towards rest, and the movement towards rest, and the movement towards rest, and that there's a pattern to these movements towards rest. So there has to be a beginning of movement to reach the movement towards rest. And there comes a point in this movement where there's an expansive energy that becomes a contractive energy. And this contractive energy finds its expression in Saturn's contraction. And this expansive energy finds its expression in Jupiter's expansion. So there's this expansion and contraction, But the contraction represents the contracts between stationary and movement. The movement stationary dynamic. And Mercury sits right in the center. And it's, when we look at alchemy, Mercury is that mutable potential that produces the change, and it's the measurement of change that time really represents when we're looking at it from a cosmic perspective. Saturn's, when we're looking at it from the Moon, a smaller lens, we're looking at it from life's cycles of life, specifically living things. So yeah, I think the education system is really quite on point when we come to looking at the way in which this paradigm is shaped, the way in which we are trapped into the system of this false paradigm of reality. And this has been a big part of our schooling. It's been there in the holly, right? So the holly is the wood that you use to hypnotize someone if you're practicing druid magic, right? So for a hypnosis ritual, you would need a holly wood. And so they use the holly wood to hypnotize the masses and put us into a receptive trance, because holly puts you into a receptive trance. The same way that oak would put you into a very active, grounded state, centered, like an oak represents that totem, in a sense, right? It's very much central to the druidic principle of the masculine expression. And you've got the willow. And the willow represents the coming out of life, going into the transcending life into the non-alive place. So willows have always been associated with death in this way, but also with the resurrection principle of life. And so this resurrection and this life between the oak and the willow, this is the lunar potential. And na is the syllable for Muladhara chakra in the west. So na and lam, the earth element, na is how to uncover the potential seeds and powers within the earth element. And so this na is quite an important thing to consider, because when we step across to the Phoenician language, we see na representing transformation, representing in some older concepts relating to the serpent, but also relating very much fundamentally to the sign of Scorpio, what it represents. So obviously a noon is a fish, and a fish represents going under the water, represents going into the unseen, hidden world of the dead. Now we're talking about the eighth sphere, essentially. Hence noon, hence Scorpio is related to occult. And when we're looking at occult, we're talking about visionary clairvoyance versus clairvoyance. There's a fundamental difference between clairvoyance and visionary clairvoyance. We'll get into that as well. But just to step back into the physical plane before we go out there into the ethers, I think it's really important to understand the vernacular, the words, the power of the letters and the numbers. One of the things that they've been doing is they've been taking our language away from us. So they took our history, they changed our history, right? They took our science. Science? Saturn. Saturn is really fundamental. It's that dedication. It's that we think in terms of the demiurge, right? When we think of the demiurge, we're thinking of Saturnian potential. That putting the builder's plans into action. So the builder, number 4, represents building, represents planning, organizing, all of these structuring elements relating to that which we could say is our projection forward, right? Our forward karmic role, as opposed to number 7 representing our backward, inward karmic role. So number 7 is more to do with going into the tail. What do things entail? Who am I? Go deep down into the tail, into my Muladhara chakra, and discover what seeds I've got hidden within myself. What are in my bones of the world that I live in? Uncover those bones, Saturn's bones, time, the ancestors. When we're looking at 4, we're looking at what is this for? What is the purpose? The 4. So 4 needs to purpose things, needs to have a structure, needs to have a plan. The north, the head of the serpent versus the tail of the serpent. So we're talking essentially about the moon's nodes when we're talking about number 4 and 7 in numerology, interestingly enough. Yes, there's a Uranus vibration with the north node. Yes, there's a Neptune vibration with the south node. There's this integral connection between the numbers. But there's something quite fundamental to understand about these planets and their relations. Neptune, the underworld, the tail, looking back. 4, Uranus, this transformative potential that's going to shape the future. So when we look at 4, what 4 is, 8 is the dynamic actualization of the principle of 4. So all that 4 has becomes stagnant. It gets reanimated by Mercury's number 5. It gets brought into a state of harmony, gets harmonized by number 6. And in the process of harmonizing with number 6, there's a powerful creative release. And this is an artistic expression of being. This leads us to the 7, which is going within. And going within is to discover the spiritual. When we've come through the cycle of going within to the spiritual, we reach the cycle of 8, where 8 represents mastering the physical plane. But at the same point of mastering the physical plane, we now have to gain a balance and a harmony between the inner and the outer realities. So these principles of construction, these plans and organizing, the blueprints, if you will, of number 4, needs to be dynamically applied by 8. So 8 is tireless in its application of this construction, which we could say is the active face of the demiurge, where number 4 is the passive face of the demiurge. And so we see this octave shift between 4 and 8, and that 4 represents the principles of 8, and 8 puts into activity the principles of 4. So when we can grasp this basic idea, we can see why it's so important that our worldview, which is representing number 4, our beliefs, our knowledge, what we want to remember, what we record, right? All of these principles. When this becomes dynamic, it becomes self-knowledge. This is Mercury. This is number 5. This is the gunas of Ganepati, Ganesha, the scribe of heaven, recording the divine messages from the spiritual planes. But in 4, it's very much square. It's very much the facts of the matter. And so they want to fill our consciousness with the facts of 4 and cause us to become stagnant. Because when we're stagnant, we're not able to reach into that fundamental number 8, which is that principle within us which is going to balance the harmonies, harmonize the spiritual and the physical. So keeping us locked into this 4 vibrational field is going to take us out of the potential of self-mastery, where number 8 is that fundamental self-mastery that will lead to the humanitarian aspect within us, number 9, where we can complete the story of life and allow that activist within us to become part of the change that leads towards Uranus. Uranus being that which has no number. As it has no number, it represents the origin, because the origin is the place of no number. We represent the origin with a 0, but a 0 is not a number. A 0 is no number. Uranus is no number. It is the origin, it's the center. So when we start to recognize how this spiral of the enneagram really operates, we can start to see how number 8 is fundamental. Now, what is 4? But what you do to 4 to get to 8, you do to 2 to get to 4. I want us to just grasp this for a moment. To understand the relationship between 2 and 8, we need to look at 4. Because when you add 2 to itself, you end up with 4. 2 is still very dynamic. It is dynamically manifesting on the outer plane, physical substance. But 4 is when it has reached its sort of crystallizing potential. But its crystallizing potential hasn't become fully active in crystallization, because crystallizing is a dynamic process which has to be fulfilled by number 8. So 2 is the potential to become form. And the potential to become form is bound in 2, which is regulated by the expansion of number 3. In order for the number 4 to become the fixed points of that expansion, brought into dynamic activity by the 5, harmonized by the 6, taken into its own epicenter by the 7, which then completes it spiritually so that it can become an expression of dynamic harmony that represents 4, that leads to the completion of 9. So we can see how the Ennead and the Kabbalah are really expressing these concepts as a dynamic spiral towards the epicenter, which is essentially the numberless, that divine feminine. And so to understand this is to sort of look around us at the world and go, well, what they wanted to do was they wanted to take our belief in miracles and take it away from us. Replace it with a word, supernatural. Turn supernatural into a derogative word so that people will snigger at you if you believe in supernatural stuff. Superstitious. And take words and put them out there as insults. Use Hollywood, use writing, use this printing press, use whatever means that they had, and they had a number of means to program the mass to the point where they will not accept certain things and that they will sneer at things that are commonsensible, in order to take us away from the holistic pagan perspective of understanding these planets and how important they are and fundamental they are for our own spiritual and manifestational place in the universe. And so they had to change our worldview. They had to take away from us our ability to recognize that we are able to shape reality with our thoughts. Just digest that for a moment. The ability to shape reality with our thoughts. When you become the dynamic driver of the process of 4, which is that crystallization of the expansive process of Jupiter, right? The North Node. And when the North Node has found its end with the South Node, it becomes the Ouroboros. This Ouroboros then becomes an expression between the inner and the outer, which is bound by the number 8. Thus, the 8 binds the inner and the outer, the rest of the inner and the movement of the outer. In the eye of the storm, there is no movement, but the wheel on the outside is turning. So you're moving from the inside to rest to the outside to movement. inside to rest, to the outside to movement. Can you see how this is rhythmic? And controlling when you move to the inside and when you move to the outside produces the rhythms, the frequencies of vibration. And so dynamically driving this system of vibration, the third principle of Hermes, this fifth principle of Hermes becomes the most fundamental part. Hence, shamanism is focused on learning to work with vibration, but working with vibration from the perspective of rhythm. You use rhythm because rhythm programs your mind. And when your mind gets into a rhythm, it gets into a point where it starts to loosen. It starts to relax. It starts to associate and disassociate at the same time.
Yes.
Because it's both in the center and on the outside of the wheel. And so this is why we're able to move our bodies when we're inducing ourselves with rhythm. So this is like sort of the key, is to take us away from rhythm, lock us in the number 4, hide number 8 from us, replace 8 with money, because 8 loves material, loves creating material. So instead of us creating the material of manifestation, the potential that we have to drive this creative process, co-creators on this planet, they take money and put it in our hands and say, there's the symbol of power that you have that is represented by 8. 8 loves power. So let's not worry about occult potential. Let's not worry about what you are in the cosmos and who you are. Let's just give you money, and that money will be a representative for the potential and power of 8 to shape the world. So now we got you playing with money instead of playing with the fundamental forces of creation, which is what 8 represents. It's very occult in its nature. So they've taken this away from us on one hand. They've taken our history away from us so that we don't have the access to sublimate into our ancestral lineage through the powers of the moon.
Yeah.
So the moon is stripped away from us, Saturn stripped away from us, and it leaves us where? Mercury. But Mercury is now unbound. So the mind is just running wild, crazy. And then they just feed the mind with crap, feed it so that the mind's just, and we lose our hearts. I don't know, what do you guys think? Am I going too fast, too far?
No, I agree. Do you want to jump in, Noble, and then I'll say my piece?
Yeah, let me just say, and they've occulted everything that you just said and kept it from us, right? And so, right, everything that you just articulated, really the sum total of the investigation that I think Silas has been on and that I've been on is just to recover what was hidden from us, right? And, just you had suggested that perhaps we ought to stay in the mundane for a minute before we get too off into the etheric plane, or the astral plane or the mental plane, and the occult, right? Is they've inverted or perverted all of that. They've removed us from our mother's bosom, right? They have extracted us from our home, nature, right? They have perverted the calendars by which we have to operate in this Western, well, at least in this Western realm, right? We were speaking the other day, Franklin, about the Aries, right? Just the beginning of the zodiacal new year, the beginning of the time in which we plant the seeds into the fertile ground, and how that's the natural cycle of the growing, the natural growing cycle. And then how when we cast our gaze at the Gregorian calendar and we think about what we're encouraged to do as young men and women to plant the seeds of our New Year's resolution, right? In January 1st, and in the northern hemisphere, right? That's in the dead of the winter, and the soil is nothing. It's not fertile, right? It's Arctic. It's very difficult. Anybody who's attempted to plant a seed, most seeds anyway, in the northern hemisphere in January would find that they're not quite successful, and so therefore, as we peer at our brothers and sisters in the Western world, and as we look at them and their efforts to better themselves, planting this New Year's resolution in the midst of winter, and we see them failing. It's by design, in my humble opinion. That is by design, right? Get us outside of our natural rhythms, as you pointed out. Silas, you mentioned in the end of your opening thoughts there that perhaps, well, I'm paraphrasing here, but what I heard you say is perhaps the the macro and the micro. That's the natural fabric of this realm, right? It's and I tend to agree. That's where I'm at this point. Is this dynamic between Saturn and the Moon is one of many dynamics between the luminaries up in the macrocosm, and the magicians, the people that are have their hands on the wheel. They understand these cycles. They understand the dynamic between Saturn and the Moon and all the other luminaries and planets also. And what they've effectively done is they've occulted that from us. They've kept it from us, and they've replaced it with something inferior. They've flat ass inverted it in a lot of cases, and certainly perverted it in many cases. And so therefore the tarot deck is stacked against us, right? And it's only once we come to and recognize that and unfortunately many of us never come to this realization, at least in it's been my observation in this particular incarnation. Most of us never come to this realization because they perfected their craft, right? The schooling system, as you pointed out, Franklin, is it's really cradle to grave. But you know, in the West and the U.S., you know, the schooling starts at 2 or 3. Of course, it starts with the parents who were also indoctrinated about 2 or 3, and then it's through PhD, right? This is all an indoctrination system to keep us from that which is true and that which is our roots. And so I think ignorance is their greatest weapon, or keeping us in ignorance, I should say, is their one of their greatest weapons. And I think it's incumbent upon us, you know, not just the 3 of us, but those of us in our spheres that have uncovered this deception, if you will, or are uncovering the truth of who we are, where we are, and what we are, is to do things like what we're doing right now, which is having this conversation so that we can share our perspective with those who have eyes to see and ears to hear. And at any rate, thanks for giving me the floor, Silas. I'll turn it over to you.
No, brilliant points. Yeah, I totally agree with both of yous, and it's very interesting, and you know, really getting back to the crux of the Saturn-Moon matrix, and we're talking about the rhythm, the numbers. You could even view the numbers as almost like the Hellenic Empyrean, which is these layers of density, right? And of course, we're in this, if you will, the darkest cosmic circle. We are the fallen angels, or the fallen star, of course. It's no coincidence, it's no accident that man has 5 limbs, and of course the star, typically in its sort of caricature form, has 5 protuberances that form its body. So the idea is, and you see it in Masonry, that we are the fallen star, the fallen angels. You mentioned the Gregorian calendar. That probably links to the Grigori of the Book of Enoch as well, where we get our term egregor, the watchers, the fallen angels. And of course, Shamyaza, the father of the conspiracy, started this entire agenda. I think it was either with 200 or 300 of these watchers, and 200, and they were bound by imprecation and a blood oath, essentially. Now, interestingly, this links to Saturn as well. Just quickly, the Greeks knew him as Chronos Anglometes, which is where we get our term angles from. It means crooked, and the crooked one, time, the crooked one. But interestingly, it also has a deeper meaning within the ancient Greek, which is almost the weaver of conspiracy, he who weaves crooked deception within the corners, which of course in the East is where demons linger, right? I do believe. So the idea is that Saturn is a chthonic deity. The chthonic essence of him is linked to conspiracy. It's linked to the great deceit. Now, what is the great deceit? What does it seek from us? Well, we've sort of hinted at it, but it's this notion of loosh, which is what Robert Monroe called it. I would call it energetic momentum. We're talking about rhythms here, numbers, and all of this. The rhythm itself is the circularity of the wheel, which itself can be projected as a sine wave. There's the sin, or the shin again. And of course, the shin links to the 21st letter in the Hebrew alphanumeric system, which is a sort of W shape. It could be the three thresholds of time. This is seen within Atlantis, Poseidon's trident. Poseidon had a temple in the middle of Atlantis, supposedly according to myth and legend. And you have Shiva's Trishula, which is also a trident. We could even look at general contemporary conspiracies or recent conspiracies. If you look at JFK, where he was shot in Dealey Plaza, look at the street plan. It is the psi letter, which is the Greek equivalent of the shin letter. Again, that threefold W letter. Yeah, exactly like that. So it's linked with time. But as well, we were talking about, remember, Kabbalah calls itself the 3-column system. We've got the 2 columns, which is the gateway, the lunar gateway. And in Kabbalah, it's called the gateway of wisdom. Wisdom is essentially synonymous in a cryptic sense in Kabbalah with information. Information is like the Eridanus, the cosmic river. It is like the flow of water. This is why, of course, the currency system, it seeks to control us through the control of information. And what color is money? It's green, which is the color of spiritual unripeness, death. Within the Hermetic tradition, it's the color of Poimandres, the green dragon. We were talking about Pisces and even the tail. So this notion of the tail is found within Polaris too. The cosmic center is hidden in the tail. So it's the same idea as Jung mentioned, where we can only reach heaven, or our branches can only reach heaven if the roots descend down to hell. So it's this idea of the centrifugal and the centripetal, the exhalation and inhalation, contraction and expansion, generation and limitation, so on and so forth. So ultimately, it's all combined in this system, this Saturn-Moon system, which is combined with Kabbalah because of the 3-column system. Again, the 2 columns are the moon, the entrance and exit way to and from this realm of oblivion, of the dead, of purgatory, if you will, all the way to the central column, which is the column of knowledge or temperance, the theat, the unity. And that is obviously Saturn. Saturn itself is not necessarily, it is a weaver of illusion, but it's also a ferryman, a psychopomp. Like what I was stating, it seeks, it wants, it's there both as the judge of the dead, and it seeks to maintain its system, but it also can be surpassed, and it can be utilized. Its energy, at least, can be utilized to surpass this world. Saturn itself, and I think Steiner mentioned this, I forget which book now, but he mentioned that Saturn is linked with the past. Now, somebody mentioned in the comments that time is an illusion. And I think in the Discord server, I mentioned why that is. Now, there's an individual called Galahad Eridanus, and he has a fascinating YouTube channel. He's a great thinker, very erudite and sagacious, and he had this notion of the secret passageway theory. And essentially what it states is fundamentally quantum mechanics. Now, instead of describing it, I'm just going to provide an allegory, an illustration, because it's far more concise in understanding it. If you look at the sun, and this is why the sun itself is used both as a symbol of time, it's the celestial diviner of the clockwork, the celestial arbiter of the clockwork rhythm of the universe, but it's also in a sense, it is the source, right? If you look at if you could visualize the threads of radiance emanating from the sun. Now, all of those threads of radiance, think of those as actualized potential. Think of Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon, that artwork cover. That's the most concise illustration of this. So essentially, it takes the source, or the source divides itself into a myriad of its actualized potentiality, which of course is infinite. Now, when it actualizes itself onto the two-dimensional square in this sense, the world or the cube, it actualizes simultaneously, meaning time itself is an illusion because past, present, and future exist as a potentiality within the moment, within the present moment. So ultimately, this is the illusion that Saturn provides, the linearity of time, the linearity of the cycles. Of course, you can't have a straight line on a curve, a curved surface like a circle, like a wheel. But this is the illusion that Saturn provides. This is, moreover, we were even talking about the cognitive warfare as well, that aspect. Saturn itself is very much locked into this, again, being the father of the great deceit. He does not wish for us to look up. He does not wish for us to smell the roses. That's a sort of symbolic pun as well. and sort of symbolism, alchemical symbolism, but he does not desires for us to traverse the thorn to get to the center of the rose, in a sense. He wants for us to be afraid of the heart of darkness, because he controls this world either through ignorance or fear, which ultimately both are synonymous because both are connected through unfulfillment. That is what Saturn desires. That the greatest form of Lush is from the unfulfilled spirit. If he can render the spirit through however many incarnations it takes to dilute it into a pure husk, then that is exactly what Saturn is after. That is the ultimate goal, the modus operandi of it. That is the crux of the great deceit. So yeah, I mean, of course, as well, the mimicry of this world itself really shows that we're not fully of this place. We even have to sleep, right? We have to defragment the mind, because the spirit itself cannot actually fully comprehend or even suffer this place for more than, 12 hours at a time in our waking life, maybe 15, 16, 17 hours, something like that, at a push. So we have to, a great deal of our life, we have to sleep. We have to go into the unconscious state. We have to go into the quantum state, which is the spiritual space, the spiritual domain, if you will. Because again, as I mentioned, if you look at that sort of emanating thread of the radiance of the sun, along that thread is every actualized potential of the past, present, and future. It is like the quantum state of information. It is probabilistic. It's not set in stone. Fate itself, which comes from a Latin etymology, which means to decree, a decree only comes from the king. The principle of kingship within this world, because obviously Saturn is the usurper of the zero order being, which is Uranus, his father. He decrees the fate, and if we believe in the world that he has created for us, then we are locked into that fate. And of course, we don't actualize, fulfill our destiny as spiritual beings. So yeah, fundamentally, it's about Lush. That is the energetic momentum that propels forward the wheel, the rhythm, all of this. It's the food for the gods, if you will. And just to mention as well, you just posted the shepherd's crook and the flail. That is exactly what Abraxas carries. Sometimes it's the shield, but it's similar as the shepherd's crook. The shepherd's crook, like the shield as well, is designed as a symbol of cognitive warfare. The sheep themselves are controlled by fear and the acquiescence to fear and ignorance. So the shepherd manipulates their mind and controls them that way, which is, of course, symbolized by the crook, and the shield itself is essentially the first line of defense. It's the control of the mind. That's how the system functions, not through physical control. It has to control the mind. And of course, the flail itself is the fear. So fear and ignorance, essentially. The crook of the shepherd, which controls the sheeple, ignorance, and the flail, which of course separates the wheat from the chaff. As I mentioned in the entire Corona event in 2020, of course, Corona means the crown, the Keter, linking with the principle of kingship, which is Saturn and Kronos. I also believe it was there was a Saturn conjunction that year as well in 2020, along with a synodic cycle, if I'm not mistaken. I might be recalling that incorrectly, but essentially the Corona event was the bifurcation. Either you fell deeper into the trap, or you realized the structure, you saw the structure, because the monster, from its etymology, from the Latin monere, which arguably actually sounds a lot like monetary or moon or money. It means that which seeks to be seen. Essentially, the monster wants to be seen. The shadow wants to be seen. That's why we have mental health issues from trauma, because it's almost like our psyche is screaming out, seeking for us to confront it and to integrate it once more with ourselves. And of course, Saturn is linked with the past. PTSD and trauma is something that derives from the past. And of course, interestingly as well, NASA, just final point, NASA released a sound, an infrared sound, I believe, or an ultrasound scan from Saturn, and or whatever they call it. And the noise itself was almost like a tormented scream, or an army of tormented souls screaming in unison. But it creates this pulsation. Interestingly, it's almost a very regularized pulsation. Again, like the sine wave, like what we're mentioning, the time, right? The father of time. So yeah, Saturn's linked with all of this. And of course, Saturn itself it derives from sator, which is a Latin verb to sow. So he is the sower and the reaper. So yeah, all of that's linked in there with Saturn, Saturn-Moon matrix, Lush, all of this.
I love that, brother. Lush means lush. Lush means abundance. So the moon is going to bring out the abundance of the reaper, because the reaper reaps nutrition, sustenance. Yeah, we can see exactly what you're talking about. I don't know if you guys can see that this is the enneagram. You might be able to see, you might not. Basically, what we're looking at when we're looking at this image here, we can see very clearly that there's three things happening there, right? And that's like a rather fundamental three things that are happening, which basically represents the three triangles on a very fundamental level. And on this fundamental level, when we look at these three triangles, we can see quite clearly that there's definitely this phasing of these three fundamental principles that you saw when I showed the image of the crook. And it's probably worth showing it again, because I think it's quite worth looking at. When we look at this crook, okay, so just when he was talking about Saturn, the black sun is associated with Saturn. This is the symbol of the black sun that I was flashing earlier, which is rather quite important, I think, for us to keep in the back of our minds. Here we have from the land of Chem. Notice how the crook has got 33 gradations, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And notice how it's the gold of the sun and it's the indigo of what would have been Venus. So Venus and the sun, but the 33 divisions, obviously 6 being the number of Venus, representing the harmonies, representing the 33 fundamental bones in the spine. Yeah. And here we have the 3 fundamental principles, right? With the flail. So the flail is representing the Trisul in a sense, right, of Shiva. And the crook is representing the spine of ourselves, which represents the Kundalini. The 3 elements also represents in Vedic cosmology the Ida, the Pingala, and the Shashumna. And this is like this fundamental movement of energy represented by the principal number of 5, which is... So to get back to this one, here we can see 1, 2, and 3, right? 1 plus 2 plus 3 equals 6, right? 7, 8, 9. 15 plus 9 is
24.
24, which is 6. 4, 5, and 6 is 15.
15, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So when we look at this, it's quite important for us to recognize what's going on here in terms of the energetics.
I just wanted to mention as well, sorry to interrupt you, Franklin, but that's also known as well, that magic square. In any magic square, there's a formula to it, but basically the primary variable is n equals 3. So depending on the number of equal rows and columns, if the n equals 3, so if there's 3 rows and columns, then all of the various columns and rows will add to 15. And 15, of course, links with the 15th tarot card, which is the devil linked with Capricorn, and of course the Saturn himself. I just wanted to mention too, earlier in our discussion with you brought up a really good point, where so we have the days, which is 30 days of the lunar cycle, and in 30 years of the orbit of Saturn, 3 and 3, the receptive, and of course the sort of giving principle, the principle that shares, if you will, the phallus in that sense. So that's also linked with the hexagram too.
Yeah. Sorry, I couldn't get my mic to work. I flashed up this other thing, and this other thing started popping up. Yeah, exactly. You know, looking at the 3 and the 3, I think it's rather fundamental when we really break it down. And so, you know, you can see here the 1 plus 2 plus 4, and 1 plus 2 plus 3 is 666, right? So there's 2 different ways of depicting these triangles. Yeah. And the way in which you depict these triangles, and the triangles I'm talking about specifically are fundamentally relating to this. Now you see the blue. The blue enneagram comes from Chaldea, right? And I know everybody's got this idea of this New Age enneagram. I just want to remind you all that the New Age enneagram, the geometry, was only invented in 1920. Before 1920, that other New Age enneagram stuff that everybody's raving about, that geometry didn't exist. There's no grimoire anywhere with that geometry in it, ever. This is the traditional maths, and there's a reason for this. Now, I have particularly located this. However, you could also create a different enneagram with this. If you put the 1, the 2, and the 3, you can change the numbers on the enneagram. There's two different ways of depicting this. I've depicted it like this for the cycle of showing us the relationship between 4 and 7. 7 represents the north node and the past. The north node of the past of the mystic is what becomes the substance of Saturn, the past, right? Jupiter, the future. The south node of the 7 represents the past and our past karmic influences that we pull. So you can see that this moves into Saturn's sphere. And you can see how the optimist of Jupiter, number 3, moves into the builder, which is the north node, which is projecting forwards what karmic intentions we are going to bring into being due to our past patterns. And there's this harmonic resonance between the two. But you can see these 3 fundamental triangles that are reflected here. And here, the way I've aligned this shows the 3, 6, 9. And there's the other way of putting it would be the 1, the 2, the 3, right? The 4, the 5, the 6, the 7, the 8, the 9. And then we would have a slightly different run of the numbers. But that would show a different set of relationships. And that would then be Saturn's enneagram, to be specific. This is the universal enneagram that relates to all of the numerations. But Saturn has its own enneagram, and so it's represented here. You can see these 3 fundamental triangles that are represented here. And you can also see there's this balance. Now notice there's a square in the middle that has been pulled out of shape, right? Yeah, between these two. It turned into a kind of a rhombus. That square is because of the forces of movement. The square becomes a rhombus, if that makes sense, because you're rotating around the axis. The axis you're rotating around is the axis point of 5. 6 and 4 becomes the transition. 4 is stagnancy, 5 is that rotational potential of energy, and 6 is the harmonizing of this particular rotation to become a consistent movement. And then this is taken in its balance 7, 8, 9. And then this is brought into its completion in 9, where then 9 dynamically becomes 1. So it crosses the proverbial threshold. But let's take a moment to look at the lunar sigil, or one of the well-known lunar sigils. And I want us to just look at this for a moment. It might be quite interesting for us to consider. You notice the cross is fundamental to the lunar sigil, and it's actually a X marks the spot. Now X has got Saturn relevance. If you look at the lunar number square, have I got a better number square here than this one? Let me see. Yeah, I do. This is easier for us to look at the numbers. Notice how the lunar number square, if you add this up, 21, that's okay, so let's do it. 21, 92, 103, 184, 225, 226, 277, 288, 349. Hold on, I made a mistake. 359. Is that right? 21, 72, 103, 184, 225, 226, 277, 288, 349. So here we see this is pointing to a particular pattern of numbers. If we look across, we're going to see 57, 74, 100 and 223, 232, 273, 346, 379, 464, 484, 493. So I'm not quite sure what's going on here. Have I got the right square? I just want to double check and see, because the numbers don't seem to be adding up like they would normally do. And there would normally be a 45. Yes, that does seem to be correct. What is it that I'm doing wrong here? Because this is not She's not telling. 57. Is it my maths that's wrong? Have you guys been following the numbers that I'm adding up? Because they should all be adding up to the same fundamental numbers. And they should be breaking down to the number 9. That's how I've always known the moon lunar square to be represented. 76, 76, 35, yes, 66, that's right. 25, that is correct. Because you've got 4 in the 5th band, and you've got this cross here. And this cross is rotating around 41, which is Mercury's number, 4 and 1. And 4 implied by 1 becomes the 5, right? 4 with 1. So this is like a dynamic start from the stagnancy of 4 of Mercury. 41 represents beginning, a new thing, starting a new thing from a level playing field, as it were, in numerology. So if we then extrapolate this, 92, 123, 204, 245, 246, 297, 308, 369. That's what the maths is supposed to imply. So 369 is what we get.
Yes.
Yep, there we go. Now when we go across, it should be the same. 57, 67, 74, 123, 132, 173, 246, 279, 354. No.
I was going to
334. 344, 369. So we've got 369 going across, 369 going down. And now if you start looking across, you're going to find 369, 369, 369. So this is a code of 369.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting because on the one corner we've got 37, which is 1, right? The past. On the other corner we've got 45, which represents the enad, the 4 and the 5 that makes the mission. On the other we've got it pinned by Mercury's 5, and here we've got 77. And 77, once again, is 14, which is 5, but it's a power number 77. So 37 becomes the point of origin, which is the 1. So we can see how the sun is being alluded to, but Mercury is being circumscribed, and Mars is sitting opposite from the sun. It just gives us a little bit of an insight into this lunar number, which is really pointing at 369, 369, 369.
Yeah.
And so this lunar potential here is really about the structure of matter. This is about the structure of the generation, how generation comes into be. And this is sort of why, oh my gosh, so sorry, people. So sorry. So sorry. This was what I was actually tallying up here. I was tallying up these numbers. Terribly sorry. I thought I was flashing this image. No one let me know that I wasn't. But basically what we're looking at here, and I'll just quickly go over it, is all of these numbers down add up to 369. All the numbers across add up to 369. Go and take a look. Find the lunar number square and you'll see. It's tabulations of 369, 369, 369. And 369 obviously adds up to 18, which is 1 and 8. 1 is the sun, 8 is Saturn. Bringing together is 9 is Mars, is the enad. So we've got this enneagram being reflected so powerfully here in this number. And when we look at the actual symbol related to the moon, it's also quite interesting. Because here we're seeing the 4 crescents, right? And the 4 crescents have got 8 points. Quite important. So the feminine relation between these crescents are 2, 2, 2, 2. So 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2. 2, 4, 6, 8 is what's being expressed here. And in the center, we've got an X, which is of 5 points, which is Mercury. So we've got these 8 potential spokes, if you will, spinning around a central number 5, Mercury. And obviously, the crescent represents this potential of things to shrink and to grow, which is what we see the moon doing sort of on a very fundamental level. And when we now look at the Saturn square, we can see the enneagram. So we've got all of the 9 numbers here, This is actually a horoscope that you'll find in India. The India, they still use the enneagram as a Saturn square, and that's how they draw your horoscope chart. For those of you that don't know, we've got the Pingala 1, 2, 3. That's the externalizing force. Then we've got the Ida, the internalizing force, the 7, 8, 9. And then we've got the 4, 5, 6, which is the pivot around 5, which is that movement. 4 meaning stability and structure, stagnancy to a point, and 6 representing harmony. Harmony of 6 is the Merkaba, and so this is how we activate that central column to leave the physical form behind. The physical form being the square that is being stretched by these two forces of opposing movement, which is represented by this particular image and by the forces of opposition within Ida and Pingala, the one being an expressive force of electrical potential that causes atoms to atomize, and the one being that force which is the magnetic component of the electric force. Hence, all things are electromagnetism. And so when we then look at this enneagram, we can see here very clearly, you can see here the 1, 3, 6, right? Sorry, the 1, 4, and the 7, which becomes 12, which is 3. The 9, 3, and the 6, which becomes 18, which is 9. And the 5, the 2, and the 8, which becomes 6. So we've got 3, 6, 9 operating through these triangles. So this is the Chaldean. It was done by, what was that guy's name? Maybe I can find an image of the original enneagram for you guys if you want to go and look it up. It's Chaldean.
I think it was Gurdjieff as well. Did he not have
No. This is New Age stuff. These are New Age guys.
Oh, I see. Right, okay.
Gurdjieff created his own enneagram, and the enneagram that he created exists nowhere in history. It's totally New Age. In 1920, that other enneagram that everybody's starting, it was created in this epoch, and we've got to understand what that means. Why? The numerology's been changed. Like here, if we look at this is a more sort of, this is the original diagram of this guy. And there he is. What's his name? It's Hlul. Yeah? Has anybody, if you guys have heard of that name, his name is Ramon Hlul. And this is the Chaldean enneagram. This particular thing that we're looking at here is 1,000 years old. Now, the Chaldean enneagram, if you look in there, you can see he's got all 3 enneagrams mapped out. None of that Gurdjieff stuff is in here. These are the 3 stars. I've got 2 of these mapped out. The third one I haven't mapped in because it creates quite a complex image. But you can, for example, see here, H is the virtues, right? And the virtues thus relates to specifically number 6, right? So there's something for us to consider, and the virtues relate to number 6 becoming number 7. And so this has got to do with the spiritual virtues, which is really that fundamental harmony that we're looking for, which moves us through the stagnation into the inner process of self-inquiry. But so this is really like where this mathematics come from, and the sacred geometry is mapped out here. And I should have actually got a better image than this. But regardless, when we look at these particular mathematical patterns here, we can see this fundamental connection here, where Saturn sits in its position in opposition to 4, and it becomes 4, right? 2 sits in its fundamental position opposite to number 7. So in Vedic numerology, number 7 is often associated with number 2, by the way. It's often interchangeable by numerologists because they see that there is this connection between the south node and the moon's potentials, that sensitivity that relates to the subliming potential of the consciousness. And number 4, the builder, is often associated with number 1 in Vedic numerology. So there's this very powerful connection. And even in Western numerology, Chaldean circles, they also had these associations between 1 and 4 and 2 and 7. This is traditional. So when we see what this means is that 4 to 7 holds the key, and that transition point is 6, right? Where 4 becomes harmony, becomes 7. This is what 8 is really doing. 8 is really holding in check the inner and the outer. 4 represents the outer, physical, mundane, factual. This is reality. 7 represents our inner, the hermetic, mystic, what's going on inside us, our own consciousness experience of what's happening and who I am. And 8 represents balancing these two forces in order to bring completion to the sphere. So when we start to see, and you see in the center here, I've put Pluto, the plowing of the toe of the center of the galactic wheel, as it was considered. Pluto has an association with the galactic center because of its wanderings. It's got a powerful relation, hence it has no number. So the plying of the toe represents that powerful transformative potential that is necessary for 9 to be reborn. And that rebirth of 9 into number 1 is exactly what the spiritual process is. So if you can arrest number 8, stop it, you can stop this from going into being. But what I really wanted to get into here was something that I've actually got for you guys that's quite interesting. And I shall read this for you. And I think this is very much worth looking at. For those of you that don't know it, it's not too long. I'll try and keep it short, but it's definitely fundamental. So this is looking at the occult histories. Now, this is Steiner's work that I'm going to be reading from here specifically, but he gets his information. Blavatsky's represented this information as well. It's actually not easy to find within the anthroposophical school, this particular information, nor is it easy to find within the school of theosophy. Neither is it easy to find within the schools of the Rosicrucian schools. This information, for some reason, is hidden. And this has got to do with the formation of the etheric and the astral plane, the Ida and the Pingala, how they came into being and why. And it's got to do with the evolutional phases of mankind and the way in which this evolutional phases work. So I'll just read Steiner's words and we can take a look at what he's actually saying. The 8th sphere is to be observed with the 8th sphere. With the earth sphere, it cannot properly be drawn either above or below. Just as the spiritual is round about us, so must we look for the 8th sphere in our environment. This means that an organ enabling man to perceive the 8th sphere would have to be developed, just as his physical senses enable him to perceive the material earth. We have developed an organ of experiencing the 8th sphere. We are conscious of it around us. So that the 8th sphere is to be described, it must obviously be described as a realm in which we are living all the time. So now we're going to get into it. On the old moon, certain pictures were present. These should have passed over to the earth as something everywhere perceptible. But Lucifer and Ahriman retained them for themselves. Lucifer and Ahriman wrested from the earth certain of its constituents and made them into imaginations, so that the earth's substance became not earthly formations, but moon formations. Into our 4th sphere, right? Therefore, there has been instilled a sphere that is really a moon sphere. The 2 times 2 going into the 4. But is filled with the earthly substantiality and is therefore a bogus creation in the universe. We're talking about the 8th sphere, and this is essentially the substance of the moon. That's my piece. To the 7th sphere, an 8th, created in opposition to the progressive spirits, has been added. The necessary consequences of this is that the spirits of form must do battle on the earth for every morsel of substantiality capable of mineralization, lest it should be wrested from them by Lucifer and Ahriman and born into the 8th sphere. We're talking about natural selection here. All earthly beings and existence are involved here. Lucifer and Ahriman strive unceasingly to draw from the earth's substances whatever they can snatch in order to form the 8th sphere, which then, when it is sufficiently advanced, will be detached from the earth and go its way
in the cosmos together with Lucifer and Ahriman. Needless to say, the Earth would then pass over to Jupiter as a mere torso. Therefore, we ourselves are involved in the battle. Lucifer and Ahriman battle against the spirits of form with the aim of wresting mineral substance from us everywhere. The formation of our skull is due to the fact that it is there that most has been wrested from us. Hence, it is precisely through the head that we can emancipate ourselves from the organism to the greatest extent. We can soar upwards in thoughts. We can distinguish between the good and the evil. And for that very reason, Lucifer and Ahriman have there been the most successful in wresting away substantiality. In the so-called noblest organ of man, they have been able to wrest away the greatest amount of mineralized substantiality. This alchemy by which the mineral substance is sent over to the eighth sphere is taking place all the time behind the scenes of existence. In other words, they are leaching mineral potential and energy from our earth sphere into the eighth sphere so that the eighth sphere can become qualified and become its own universe. Basically, paraphrasing. If everything were to run without a hitch for Lucifer and Ahriman, if they were everywhere able to rest as much as they rest from the organ of the head, Earth evolution would soon reach the point where Lucifer and Ahriman could succeed in destroying our Earth and in leading over all evolution of worlds into the eighth sphere, so that the Earth evolution as a whole would take a different course. Hence, Lucifer endeavors to unfold his greatest strength of all at the place where man is most vulnerable, namely in his head. The stronghold, which is the easiest for Lucifer to capture in the human head, and everything that is similar to the head in respect to the distribution of the mineral element, so that it can be drawn out in the same way, is equally opposed to the danger of being dispatched into the eighth sphere. No less prospect looms as a consequence of the intention of Lucifer and Ahriman that the whole evolution of humanity may be allowed to disappear into the eighth sphere, so that this evolution would take a different course. Man is perpetually exposed to the danger of having his free will wrested from him and dragged by Lucifer and Ahriman into the eighth sphere. This happens if the element of free will is transformed, for example, into visionary clairvoyance. And this has got a lot to do with technology that we're facing in the world right now, this visionary clairvoyance. When this is the case, a man is already in the eighth sphere. This is a matter of which occultists are so reluctant to speak, because it is an awful, terrible truth. The moment the free will is transformed into visionary clairvoyance, what unfolds in the human being becomes the booty of Lucifer and Ahriman, the booty. It is immediately captured by them and thereby spirited away from the earth. You can see from this how, through the shackling of free will, the specters of the eighth sphere are created. Lucifer and Ahriman are engaged perpetually in shackling man's free will and in conjuring all sorts of things before him in order to tear him away what he makes out of these things, and let it disappear into the eighth sphere. This devilish plan, for here we have indeed to do with the devil, was put into effect by Lucifer and Ahriman when it had occurred to occultists to endeavor to accompany something through mediumship. This has got to do with magic and sorcery, by mediumship entering into a pact with a daemon or a being and making a material shift of the physical universe based upon this pact and this contract. And this kind of sorcery and magic is really what he's talking about here, this dark sorcery. Lucifer and Ahriman inspired the mediums through whom they arranged the whole business in order that the people might be guided to the realm where the dead were alleged to be speaking. Lucifer and Ahriman could then lay hold upon their souls. The occultists were alarmed when they saw what course things were taking, and they could counsel amongst themselves as to how to steer away from it. Even those who belonged to the left wing realized what was happening, and they said, "We will do something different." Now, visionary clairvoyance, which is false, must be distinguished from Steiner's own exact clairvoyance, which is true. This is atavistic. This is an added ibid note from his actual lecture. Asuras, the demons, as it were, are spirits of the very greatest egoism who remained behind during Saturn's evolution. So what he's saying is that there was a phase in evolution. This is the fourth world we're living in. The world has been created and destroyed. There have been these different yugas, and in these yugas there are beings that have survived in a quasi-sphere which isn't real, which he says is aka a bogus sphere, which is basically owning its existence by leeching off of the substance, mineral substance of this sphere in order to keep its maintenance. But its goal is to leech off all of the substance of this sphere so that it can become the governing factor of all evolution. So the Asuras are these highly egoistic beings. They want to condense matter and compress it even more so that it can be spiritualized and brought back to its original condition. That is their point of evolution 4 yugas ago. And these beings exist within the 8th sphere. They are the dregs of planetary evolution that goes from Saturn to Vulcan. Vulcan representing that potential transformative movement towards our next spiritual incarnation. Saturn representing the first age, the age where time came into being. The Asuras inhabit the moon. So this is the connection between the moon and Saturn. And the moon is also where the substance is extracted to create this 8th sphere to begin with, which is governed over by the beings from Saturn. I hope you guys are following this. The Asuras inhabit the moon, and from there they work on the men whom they want to drag down into the 8th sphere and thereby tear them away from progressive evolution and its goal, the Christ. Okay, this is Steiner's idea, which is basically, spiritualization, evolution. All those who strive towards the 8th sphere will eventually live on a moon. So this is from the contents of Esoteric Classes Transcript Archive GA266, for those of you that are interested. Yeah, brother, fire away. There's a lot here.
Yeah, so the Asuras, I'm currently writing a book on them now, and there's a few Indian historians, interestingly, both contemporary and, recently historical, from basically the 18th century onwards, that state that the Asuras, in the long distant days of antiquity, roughly around the Copper Age, they were I guess you could call them the genesis point of the sort of financier and the commercial based conspiracy. Now we were taught. Now, of course, I just want to mention. Of course, I've mentioned previously on other live streams when the Asuras and I guess you could call it the Vedic religion, when that went westward into Iran, the Asuras and the Devas got completely inverted, right back to this sort of Saturnine inversion, where the Devas were seen as the evil doers, the evil deities, and the Asuras the Ahuras were seen as the benevolent ones. And this obviously was it was synthesized in the idea of Ahura Mazda, which I believe means the Lord of Wisdom. Now, that alone is very interesting just as a title, but Ahura itself, if we look at the linguistic development of it, Ahura went even westward, that idea, the Zoroastrian concept, and became Yahura. And then we start to get into the idea of Yah. Now, going back to the 15 of that magic square, and of course the 15th tarot card being the Devil, Saturn, Capricorn, the idea of limitation and entrapment or spiritual captivity. 15 in Hebrew is pronounced Yah. Now, because of its connection to the holy tetragrammaton, it's typically altered, it's changed, right? It's usually not pronounced as Yah in common parlance, but that is how it is actually pronounced in the Hebrew language, or it's how it's at least codified in that language. So you have that connection there as well. You can also make the connection between the Hyksos, the Shepherd Kings, the Amorites, and of course their worship of Set, the god of darkness, the god of the donkey as well, the donkey-headed god, the donkey-headed chimera. So again, the donkey is associated with the traveling merchant. Again, another link to commerce. And then that takes us back to the moon, because the moon links with water, the amniotic fluid that is around the fetus within the womb. Again, fetus, feed us, right? You have this idea. And of course, the fetus is conceived like the idea or the thought is conceived on the honeymoon, where an oath is made within the mare age, right? The mare, the sea, the Latin for sea, and from the honeymoon is conceived the honey, the sucra of the gods, which is the fetus, the feed us. So you have all of these little linguistic nods here and there. And of course, English, this works in English because English is a completely constructed language, at least in its modern sense from Shakespearean English onwards. And of course, Shakespeare as well. I believe it was Steiner that actually mentioned that there are the 7 planetary stages lead into the 8th sphere, which is essentially the conjoining of all of them. The 7 planetary stages themselves mirror the 7 ages of man. Now, of course, remember Shakespeare in that famous, I forget the play now, but he mentions that all of the world is a stage and everyone is an actor upon the stage. And each has their line and all of this. But he mentions that each of the actors has, or each man himself, lives 7 ages, right? Or 70 years, right? 10 years for every age. So there's that connection as well. Again, the microcosm and the macrocosm, the reflectivity of everything. Light itself is darkness because light does not exist without its definitional contrast with darkness, and this goes on with death and life, good and evil, so on and so forth. Now, Asura, somebody actually mentioned it, they picked up on it. The Amorites came from Syria, where Syria is now. That is Asura. In the ancient tongue was Surya, and of course the eastern part of that was Assyria or Asuria. Surya, I believe, is the sun. So we have this connection again with the sun and Saturn and all of this, right? But interestingly,
Surya for these 7 horses.
Yes. But it's interesting as well because what did the Egyptians called the Amorites? They called them the Hyksos. They also called them the Amar or the Amu, but they also referred to them as the Asuia, or where we get our term Asia, Asiya. So you have all of these connections. And of course, interestingly, you even have the Asuan Confederacy during the Sea People invasions and the collapse of the Hittite Empire, essentially. The Asuans, again, there's that idea of Asuria and all of this notion, even in the Asiatic Asia. They were comprised of 22 nations, just like the major arcana, the Hebrew letters. I mean, none of this can be a coincidence. But I in the book, I map all of this. But sorry, I went on a total tangent. Getting back to the Indian historians, the contemporary historians, they mention that the Asuras were a merchant class in this ancient past. And that they had a tasselocracy, which is a naval monopoly or naval dominance over the entire world. They were the preeminent maritime power of the world. Now, where do we read of that in the mythology? Atlantis. Now, where is potentially the site of Atlantis? In a place called the Rishat structure, or the Eye of the Sahara, it's also called. That is in a place called Mauritania, which literally means the land of the Moors. It derives from Latin. The Moors, the Amor, the Amar, America, Amorica, which is the Latin name for Brittany, where the Jacobins orchestrated the French Revolution. We have Chateau de Amorgois, which literally means the castle of the Amorish or the Amorites in French, which is also known as the Mother of Darkness castle. It's rather infamous. It's in Belgium. Most people should know of its name here. The Mother of Darkness also links with the Mahakali, which the Mahakala or Mahakali, I believe, means the Dark Mother. So it's this malefic aspect of the moon as well, just like, of course, Surya has its malefic aspect of, oh God, what is the Saturn deity in Hinduism? It's not Shakti. I want to say Shakti,
Shani.
but it's Shami. Yeah, Shani, that's it. So you have this same sort of a contrast. And of course, I mean, even in classical astronomy, Saturn was on the fringes, or the outer rim, if you will. He was the hand of the clock. He was the keeper of time in that sense. He was the coldest planet because he was the furthest from the sun. You also see this within the Latin Janus and all of these two-faced gods, and even Hecate as well, right? But ultimately, what I'm getting at is there is a clear linguistic, if you employ linguistic archaeology, there is a clear parallel between all of this. There's a fabric here, a weave and a weft of conspiracy. And it shows that, like what you're saying, Franklin, that there appears to be a cyclicality to all of this. There appears to be, in a manner, a sort of a worldly aeon to it all. I think the term one could use is the phantom matrix. That's basically what we're dealing with fundamentally. So the shadow establishes a shadow, and like what we're seeing Steiner talk about there, is that the shadow wants to create another shadow perpetually to again bring the soul into an even deeper panopticon style system, where it can be more easily involuted and controlled and corralled. Do you want to jump in, Franklin, or?
Did you want to say something, dear brother?
No, I'm
Noble
good.
intent.
Please, Franklin.
Okay. I love what you're sharing. And I think, when we start to speak about these Ashuras, like you say, there's this opposition. I believe, I'm not sure whether there was specifically a migration from the east, because there's evidence of a migration from the west and evidence of migration from the east. And when you look at the formation of the language, if you go way back to the Proto-Indo-European languages, it seems that there was this gathering on the steppes all the way from the Indus Valley, from the Anapan civilization, right across Eastern Europe, maybe even as far as Ireland, which is quite interesting. And a lot of Ireland is a little bit high up, huh? If you think about it, off the ocean. Food for thought. And so in the steppes region, there was this development of language. And then the language came down, and it seems like it split at a point close to Afghanistan, where it went two directions. And it seemed like it also at the same time came down in the west. And then there was a migration from the west to the east, and there was a migration from the east to the west. I think what we're looking at is different times of different migrations based upon different conditions. Yeah. Well, I think we're looking at a very, very long period of time. But it sort of gets me looking at this and makes me think, like,
I think like all of this language comes from one basic root language that used to be the fundamental language. And getting to the story of the Persian perspective of the Ahuras and the devas, as they call them. Obviously, in India, the devas are the deities. Now, if we go to the Vedic old notions where they look at where the devas came from, they speak about how the devas and the asuras arrived here similar time. They arrived on Earth in their vimanas from the lokas, the other worlds, other universes out there in space and time. And these, you can see pictures of what these vimanas look like because they depicted them as temples. Classic example is Jagdish Temple, where I used to go all the time. And I love, it's one of my favorite. I have to show it. You guys have to go to Udaipur. It's a special place if you ever go there. And they've got a Bangladeshi shop there, right there, which is pretty cool. Because on every Shiva every Monday. So here you're going to look at what Jagdish Temple actually looks like. No, here's a better look. Just to give you an idea. And I used to sit there and meditate on this place and think to myself, gosh, you know, is this not some kind of a spacefaring craft? If you get close to it, you look at it, it's incredible. The whole thing's built out of these little statues, little people that are on the shoulders. It's basically a huge 3D hieroglyphic library. It's incredible. You can read it for hours and just, you know, you can spend weeks, months. I had to spend a long time in Udaipur to study this temple, to look at these little pictures, because it's a hieroglyphic library telling you about history. But anyway, getting back to the point, they speak about how the Asuras arrived with the Devas, but the Asuras got corrupted by the space. And you're right about the control of humans. The Asuras are very focused on the control of humans. And then we've got all these stories about how the Asuras wanted to take the wives of the Devas for breeding, because the Asuras were not able to breed here. Now, the Asuras and the Devas come from lokas far away, similar. But the Asuras were affected by this matter in a different way to the Devas. The Asuras were also bigger, by the way. The Devas had more mystical knowledge, but the Asuras had supernatural powers as well. Important to recognize this. Then the Asuras created within them a sub-race called the Rakshas. And the Rakshas are the gigantic demonic beings, giants. Now the Rakshas in the Persian accounts are called the Yakshas, right? And the Yakshas are the giants. So let's step across the ocean. We've got the Nephilim, the Asuras. And we've got the Anakim, the Rakshas. And if we step across to Greek, we've got the 200 Grigori that landed and started to mix with the humans. Then if we step across to the Sumerian, we've got the 200 Igjigji that were brought from Nibiru and stationed on Mars until just before the flood. Sometime before the flood, when conditions on Mars were becoming really difficult, it was Marduk who came and made a big scene. Finally, he convinced everybody, like Enlil and Enki, it's not right. They want to come here. So the 200 of them were brought to Earth. They were bigger. Their heights were more along the line of 24 feet, 20 to 24 feet. Some of them, I believe, could be potentially 40, 45 feet tall. They speak of specific measurements of these, what do you call them? The foot, the old name of the foot.
Cubit?
Yeah, cubit. So, but I don't know whether those ones came to Earth. Those ones are mentioned in the earlier Sumerian tablets on that planet. They had some of them that big. But regardless, these big ones came to Earth, and they ended up being really instrumental in the mining of the gold in the Abzu in Africa, where we've got these thousands of gold mines to this day. So we can see this story all around on all different. If you're really interested, there's this researcher in South Africa who discovered Adam's calendar, and he's been looking into a lot of these African stories. And we've got these stories here in Africa, like these are part of our local mythos, tribal stories that speak about this. And he believes he's found the resting place of Enki in southern Africa, because it's written that Enki rested in the Abzu, and the Abzu is Africa. And that's where all the gold was being mined, because Enki, after having the key stripped from him, became once again Ea. You mentioned Ea? Ea. So Ea was the first god name on earth used in any kinds of religious rites. And then from Ea became Eaor. And then from Eaor developed Yahweh. E-A-O-U-E. That's 5 vowels, right? Yahweh.
Mm-hmm. And it also sounds like the sound of the donkey as well. Interestingly, I just wanted to point that out. That's another slight connection there. Yeah, sort of.
The key of the Don.
Yes.
Who are the Don?
Yes.
Who are the Don? The tribe of Don.
And we've got the golden Dawn in the White House right now, the Ibabar, which was the temple of Shamash as well, or the temple of the sun in Sumeria. I mean, it's all of these connections present themselves here.
So you mentioned the donkey, and I can't resist. Got to do it. It's just got to be done. So, you notice what's at the feet here. We notice what's laying at his feet. The Hierophant has got the key of Dan, right? The 2 keys. And notice in his hand as well, this is very interesting. So he's got this tool in Egypt, which is like that triple cross, but it also represents the 3 phases, right? Stepping up and stepping down electrical currents. There's an element of technology as how they build capacitors. But regardless, this represents these 3 fundamental crossings. And the 3 fundamental crossings can also be represented by the Tau cross as 3 fundamental directions, which is really an ode back at the cube, Saturn's cube. But we're looking at Taurus. And here, the toric field, you need the key. And it's the key that the Don tribe kept. So the donkey, I think, is like a subtle hint at this guy. And this has got to do with the forces of conditioning. So your forces of conditioning in your life that you've taken on, and that's represented by this archetype. So if you want to mind control and shape someone with conditioning, this is how you would do it. And hence, this is how they did it. The church. And church, okay, let's just go with the church. So this is how they manifested this. Star Trek tells the story beautifully, right? The Starship Enterprise. Yeah? So it's an enterprise. Enterprise is money, business. Right. And Kirk, right? Kirk, Captain Kirk. Kirk is a Scottish name, and you're obviously Scottish, right? Kirk is a church, no?
Yes, it is a church, yeah. Yep.
Captain Kirk of the Enterprise. They've been throwing it in our faces for a long time. And that's all about going to other planets and not interfering with the evolution of other beings. Why is it so important that we go to all these other planets and not interfere with the evolution of other beings? Because according to our old stories, someone came here and interfered with our evolution. And this, I think, comes right back to the lunar Saturn matrix, because right now someone's interfering with our evolution, right? Why do they need to poison our head? Root of Stein is talking about the head. So the water poisons your head, sodium benzoate poisons your head, the hormones poisons your head. What's going on, you two? You guys okay? They're running around and playing little bunnies. Yeah. He's humping her the whole time. Am I going to have to separate them? Have you ever had rabbits? He will not stop humping her. I'm going to have to go turn on the lights in there and have a chat with him. So this idea of this fundamental sort of relation, I think, is something for us to to take on board when we look at this, because there is this pattern of changing our bodies with vaccines, changing our consciousness with media, and changing the way that we think with AI, changing our bodies physically by putting chemicals into the head to stop the electrical neural system from operating at a premium point, putting hormones from estrogen, from growth hormones from milk and dairy,
and endocrine
meat.
The also the fake. Sorry to interrupt you, Franklin. Also the fake food as well, which is a type of endocrine disruptor, and everything within the food as well. A lot of artificial foods, cheaper foods that are more accessible to people in urban areas as well. They're designed to not just destroy things like the sex drive and such, but yeah, absolutely, to destroy the hormones, to destroy the balance of the translatory organ, which is the mind, and of course the will itself. I sent you something on Telegram, Franklin, and I wanted to just touch upon it really, really quickly. Well, that's another thing with GMOs. You also have flavor perception. That is also through CRISPR technology and other essentially gene hacking. They can genetically modify organisms so they can take, for example, with soy, they took the bitter taste out of soy through flavor perception, manipulative, I guess you could call it tampering or genetic hacking. I forget what the technology platform is called. It's something to do with CRISPR, but there's a specific technology associated with that. But again, the flavor, the taste buds is a line of defense which they're breaking down, you know. Do you have anything to add on this, Noble? Do you want to jump in regarding the control of the system over us and our mind?
Oh, yeah. Oh, geez, man. Which thread shall I pull on? There's, right? I mean, my goodness, we could go off on so many different tributaries. So, gosh, and I'd at the risk of taking us down another one, or introducing another one, right? Because Silas, you brought this up, and of course on the Discord server, in a lot of your work, you've discussed this a lot. And Franklin, of course, you introduced the eighth sphere and Steiner. I think that there's some general head nod going on here. Is that one of the objectives is to extract the louche, take the lusciousness, the abundance. I heard you say, Silas, something to the degree, this is quite some time back though, but it's they're harvesting that unrealized potential or that unrealized purpose, right? And so, you know, if we're head nodding on that, if we're of one mind that there's an extraction of our essence or the fruits of our essence, and that is indeed what's going on here. One thing that I've been pondering, and I think it's worth, perhaps this is for another show or another podcast, but is when we bring the cow, and forgive me for all you vegans and vegetarians out there, but when we bring the cow to slaughter, right? In the last days before that, we fatten the calf. And so what struck me as odd is if I was king for a day, or if I was the slave master and I was doing the one, if I was the one doing the extracting, if I'm vampiring off the louche or the mineral potential of humanity, why would I want to degrade it? Why wouldn't I want to optimize it? Why wouldn't I wish to bring it in quotes into coherence, right? And in other words, really siphon off the real gold from the human, or from the sentient being. And so I that's something that I've been thinking through, is because I don't take issue with this idea of Lush and Steiner's work in the eighth sphere. That's, again, it seems it's been occulted, and it makes sense to me. And perhaps there's a time for degradation, and protect as seemingly as those who are in control and wielding the weapons and controlling the digital fences or the things that corral us. Perhaps there's a time for this degradation. Of course, we know just from our study of slavery in the South in the United States. I mean, you really don't. It's not wise to teach your slave class how to read. You don't certainly want them too awful educated. But you do want to make them strong, right? You want to feed them appropriately, and then you want to pair the largest male with the largest female, for example. In that case, of course, we're in the output of the human potential, of course, was labor, right? Physical labor. Now it seems like we've moved beyond that, right? We've moved beyond labor in the physical sense, and it seems to me like we're moving more into its origins, into the life force, right? And so I just wanted to beg that question, and let's put a pin in that real quick, and then also going back all the way to the Saturn-Moon matrix concept, and this idea of the correlation between the two. And clearly this is a Saturn cult. It clearly the powers that be, through their various the ways that they've been incarnations, for what it were, the various forms and shapes that they've taken over the years, worship Saturn. There's no question about that. As we relate this back to the microcosm, to the human, and to the zodiac, into the natal chart, into the transits, and at least as I understand it, oftentimes, and this goes to your point, Silas, is that essentially the extraction is to try to capture the unused potential in us as human beings. And so that suggests, first of all, that we have potential, right? That we have, I think you actually used the word purpose, right? Or dharma, right? That's seems to be a phraseology that is that we can point to in various cultures throughout all of this world and in its various time horizons. But at any rate, I thought that was very a good call out, actually. And so it's this unrealized purpose or potential. And so ironically, we can turn to Saturn as we look at someone's natal chart and where it's positioned at the time of their birth, to give us some clue or some understanding of what said human's purpose or potential is, right? And as we study our own natal chart in relation to the transits that pass in real time, we come to realize, in particular for those of us who have come up to our Saturn return, which is that 29-year point where Saturn makes its way all the way back to where it was when we were born, we realize that Saturn is a taskmaster, right? Saturn is keeps us in check, and certainly it can be malefic in that way. But when we are straying from the middle path, from the narrow path, our dharma, the path of the heart, my experience at 54, almost 54, is as I stray away from my purpose, for the purpose that's been articulated to me fairly clearly in my natal chart, that there is a force, and I like to call it Saturn, that kicks my ass back on track, right? It is that which limits me from going astray. It creates it. Of course, I test it as a human being quite frequently in my life. Is the boundaries of Saturn. I'm guilty of charge as testing these boundaries as put forth by Saturn. But at any rate, nowadays, with conscious awareness of more or less what we're discussing today, the occult or the implications of the macro versus the micro, and having some awareness around these things, I'm mindful of the energies that are specific to not only Saturn and the moon, but all of the planets, right? But Saturn in particular, and of course its little sister, um, really gives me an indication of where I'm at in my progress, right? And so as I feel pain, the pain of circumstance, the pain of the acute pain I'm talking about, not necessarily the pain that we can all see in the macro, in the larger world that we're in right now, that is going through some certainly collective pain. And although that does impact me as an individual, but I'm referring more to the pain and the trials that are present in my sphere of influence. And so anyway, this is a long way of agreeing with you, gentlemen, and that it seems to me that Saturn and the moon help us understand what our potential is or our purpose, and when we stray from it, there's a consequence. And what I hear you guys saying and making a good argument for is the powers that be extract that which I am not using fully in this middle path, right? And they will continue to do so. In fact, they will go so far as to deceive us from the very notion that we have a path or a purpose in the first place, an individuated path, a unique expression of God experiencing himself, right? They will occult us from that so that we are not clued into these to any of this, frankly, so that they can do precisely what it is that you guys have done a good job of evidencing, right? And so that's my 2 cents for now.
Yeah, I would say the individuation of number one, which is the power of the sun, of 7 horses drawing Surya or Ra's chariot across the sky, is bound by the potential of 2. 2 represents potential. That potential of 2, which is the lunar. So the lunar represents the potential, hence the sublimative. Saturn represents the actualization of agency, I would say. So the potential bound in 2 of the moon is expressed as the actualization of agency and the expression of direct will in Saturn. So when you constrict the sublimative potential by entertainment, right? And entertainment stops us from sublimating, then it restricts our agency. And I think that the idea where Stein is going with the free will, with the usurping our will, starts with the potential. And so the worldview has got to rob us of our potential, that we're just subjects.
Well, this is why you have the Hierophant as well. The Hierophant is like Taurus, like the Earth, and his juxtaposition, his militant juxtaposition to Orion, which is, again, a sort of symbol of man within that lower essence, a symbol of the fool, actually, ultimately. I mean, if you look at it on the Rider-Waite tarot deck, the vest, or the, oh God, I forget what they call it. Is that a Waffen rock? It's basically like a vest, a vestment, a cloak of the fool. It has the number of stars in the same sort of pattern that you would have with Orion, and then moreover as well, his hand grabbing the stick of the knapsack. I think it is it's the knapsack, to the head, which is the middle point, back to obviously what he's storing in there of the knapsack. That creates, of course, Orion's belt, which is the Tria Prima. It's the same idea as the actionable will, which is of the right hand, which is mercy, kindness, that which establishes something. Therefore, it's the generative will, as opposed to the more hostile or limiting will of the left hand. And then, of course, the mind, which is the middle. Again, this links with the Saturn sigil as well. I think it was at 4, 5, 6 of that main axis. And then, of course, that which is in the knapsack is that which is obfuscated from his view. It is storing, it's the provisions in which he stores in that veil, if you will, that perforated veil, that helps him along his journey, along his descent into the abyss, across the precipice. But of course, the fool is that of motion too. But another thing to mention, you mentioned, Noble, why degradate or fatten the calf, if you will, or even with the crop, why nourish it, or why not nourish it? Why provide? Yeah, jump in. Sorry.
Yeah. Why degrade it? Why not nourish it? Yeah.
But my argument would be it is a nourishment. See, the thing is, everything in this world is completely inverted. And let me just explain it with, for example, the English language, right? Neil in the comments is mentioning about love. But if you look at love and and I Pet Goat 2, that short video with the hanged man right at the beginning, makes that very, very clear. If you flip around love, you get evol, right? Which of course sounds homophonous with evil, like live, right? Live in its reversed sense is evil as well. You also see that with the devil card. You have devil, that flipped around as lived. 8 as well is also similar to ate, as in past tense of the past participle of eating. So again, like Saturn gains the loosh, the sustenance. I call it the energetic momentum. That is what feeds the gods, if you will. It's what feeds the cycle to perpetuate itself. Thus, it has 8. And of course, Saturn is associated with the past as well. But you also see, for example, with mind, right? The mind is being mined for gold. This is where you get this sort of metaphor of the Anunnaki. You also get the metaphor in alchemy as well of the gold and lead and the contrast between the two. And of course, those are all states of Mercury. Now, I'm touching upon briefly Mercury. Mercury is like water. You don't actually see Mercury nor water. You merely see that which it reflects within its microcosm. It reflects the macrocosm within even the smallest minute drop. So again, you never truly see that essence. Again, like the moon, you never truly see the moon. All you see is the luminescence it reflects of the sun. It's that sort of symbolism as well. But the mind is being mined for gold. But how is gold produced? It's produced vis-a-vis the supernova. It's produced vis-a-vis chaos. Pure, unrivaled, unadulterated chaos and dissolution. And it's the same idea as Negredo, or putrefaction, the first stage of the magnum opus, the alchemical great work, which is putrefactio. It's a compound of 2 Latin terms, which literally means putra, decay, factio, to make. It's Boaz and Yakin, the side of severity and mercy, or literally to create within this world. You create vis-a-vis decay, like what you were alluding to. It's vampiric. So everything is inverted. If you want to, again, like Saturnalia, if you want to make the crops ripe, if you want to fatten the bulls or the cows for slaughter, then what you must do is get them to engage in the vices of gluttony directly, for example. Or in Saturnalia's sense, it was a way to form, in a sort of prescribed and formalized manner within a controlled setting, to vent the sort of psychological angst within the population through a means of engaging in the vices and the avarice that was deep within their souls. So they basically, it's a form of transmutation. they took that, which was this hatred for the system, this will to subvert the system, and the system itself used that in a way, in an alchemical way. They transmuted it and corralled it psychic. I guess you could call it a psychic funnel. They psychically funneled it into vices. And through that, they gained the energetic sustenance, or, in the sort of, in the political sense, they vented the angst of the population through these means. So in a similar sense, like what you're seeing with our world today, the reason people are being allowed to basically unravel the system is because the subversion itself is created by the system. This is the irony of the Saturn-9 system, that it is both a judge of the dead, but it also tempts the dead. It, jump in, Franklin.
I was just going to say that once you've systemized or turned the people's minds, like Steiner's saying, gotten hold of their minds, and turned their minds into a systemic engine of a particular paradigm and pattern, then for them to destroy the system is great, because guess what they're going to create out of the ashes? The same thing, because it's now part of the pattern. It's become our habit. Rhythm is like that. Once you're in the rhythm, like, when you're dancing, like, what comes next is going to be based upon what came before, and it's going to repeat itself in a new paradigm, but it's going to be the same structure repeating itself over and over again, because that's how rhythm works. And once you get in rhythm, you're in rhythm. You can't just step out of rhythm once you're in rhythm, because the moment you step out of rhythm, you lose the whole flow and you've got to start again. And so there's the pattern, I think, in our consciousness, that once we're in a particular phase of moving in that direction, so we've now become so woke trained that even if we were to dismantle the system, I'm pretty sure that we would be creating the exact same system, probably worse. I mean, what do you guys think? Worse?
I would see. I think, and this ties in with what I sent you in terms of the image. In fact, I sent two images, and that image there is exact. Basically, what you're seeing there is you'll see the circle, this symbol all the time, and even Young also featured it within his book. I think it was the Red Book, if I recall correctly, and I think he likened it to something to do with the shadow and individuation. I forget now, but I think it was something along those lines. But essentially, it's the solar cross. Now, the solar cross itself, or the saltire, the X, the Tav, which also links with the Omega, the end, and as you stated, Franklin, Saturn. So basically, what you're seeing there is with the world ages, if you look at the way the world ages are set up, they roughly track this sort of 6,000, 7,000 year cycle. Now, each of these it's a sort of sub-cycle of the grander zodiacal cycle, right, of the 12 signs. Now, the 12 signs are broken into the quarter, where you have the 3 signs. There's the 3 again, the Tria Prima, the 30 years, the 30 days, both of the Saturn and Moon. But we started in Taurus, this reset from the previous precursor civilization, and we will end in Aquarius, right? Or somewhere halfway through Aquarius, if you were to translate the 7th millennia Anno Mundi into the Anno Domini calendar, which is roughly 3,000. Well, the 7th millennia begins on the nightfall of, I think it's either November or December 26th, 3239 AD. The 6th millennia is obviously 1,000 years previous to that, 2239 AD. So we're 214 years away from the 6th millennia. That's when everything unravels itself. Again, you typically see cross-culturally throughout all of these cycles typically halfway in between the cycle, give or take, you will have a deluge of either water or ice. Now, again, that could be symbolic or it could be actual literal. And then right at the end, you will have this baptism via fire. You see it with the Götterdämmerung, Ragnarok, Yggdrasil, the world tree is burnt, is rent asunder by Agni, who is the Jotun of fire, if I recall correctly. So, but of course, Leaf and Leaf TruthSayer, which is the divine couple, the Adam and Eve, if you will, they hide themselves within Yggdrasil, and they survive this sort of firestorm. So what you're seeing there is I think it's metaphor myself. It could be literal. In fact, the Zohar actually sort of posits it in a literal sense. I mean, they say literally they will destroy Rome, they will destroy the sons of Ishmael and all of this through actual, I think it's arrows of hellfire and that sort of language, which obviously in our modern sense invokes this idea of missiles and such, but who knows, right? But the baptism via fire is this notion of the primal fire. Somebody mentioned in the comments that you can never defeat God. The architect knows this. This is why you need the resets and the cycles. It's like what the Matrix mentioned. Each world age, each of these resets, these cycles from between each, for example, Taurus to Aquarius, is from Aldebaran, that royal star in Taurus, to the royal star of Fomalhaut, which is in Pisces Austrinus, which is the southern fish linked to Aquarius, the age of man, the water pourer. And he that movement is basically from one integral anomaly to the next integral anomaly. What is the integral anomaly? Well, consciousness itself is a quantum state. It's dimensionless. It is ineffable. It is beyond confinement. It can only be confined of its own volition, right? We can only be tricked into this system. Therefore, the box itself, eventually, the primal fire that is within us can no longer be blinded by the Promethean fire of technology. Thus, it needs the reset through chaos to literally reconfine us, to resentence us to our prison sentence, with cosmically speaking, to essentially reconsecrate us to this world, to sort of a tactic of shock and awe, if you will. It's because that which is dimensionless can never be eternally or even infinitely maintained within the box. It's impossible unless you maintain the illusion. So the each integral anomaly to the integral anomaly, I call it the quickening, right? The closer you're getting to this 6th and 7th millennia, the unravelment in the 6th millennium, and of course the final reset, as the Zohar mentions, the resetting of heaven and earth, the remaking anew of heaven and earth. That anew, by the way, is also the Sumerian deity of the sky. I mean, that's not by accident either, this idea of anew. But in essence, it's the architect's imperfect system. It's, as the Matrix mentions, it's the sum of the remainder of an imbalanced equation. That's basically what you're looking at. And so what you're seeing there is essentially the macro cycles as projected onto the zodiac. So each of the three intermediary cycles between each quarter, ultimately, it's recycled every every world age, grander world age. Eventually, this all comprises the precessional year, where we go from Polaris to Vega in terms of what becomes our new North Star. Give or take 25,920 years. So, however, the reason they call this the final redemption, or of course, as they call it now with the Great Reset terminology, is basically, pardon me, from Taurus to Aquarius, that is the final one. After that, everything is really, there's a total remaking of heaven and earth, because remember, after each of the sub-cycles from, of course, Aquarius to Scorpio, Scorpio to Leo, Leo to Taurus, there is a scarification on the actual landscape of all of these baptisms via fire, baptisms via the grand deluges, via either water or ice. Of course, the Rishat structure is a potential example of that, geologically speaking. So, people eventually piece together everything. And of course, if the architect didn't put in that great reset, where the entire simulation is basically wiped clean, is remade anew from the ground up, there would be a complete breakdown of the system. The spirits would be chapping at the door to leave the Disney realm, if you will, right? They wouldn't want to be in show business anymore. It would, it would be a mass exodus. So, and of course, the system would collapse because the system is vampiric. The vampire itself must ensure to effectively harvest the blood, the life force from the chattel. It must ensure that the chattel is subservient and acquiescent to the demands of the vampire. In fact, the chattel believes it's in their interests to maintain themselves mentally within that system. And in the last image, Franklin, just really quickly, I do apologize for taking up so much time.
Do you have it handy? Because the same one, yeah?
I think I sent you it. Did I send you it?
I saw this one when I looked before on Telegram. I didn't see another one.
Yeah, I sent the Splendor Solace.
Sent it after maybe.
So I sent it just there. So
okay, it's still downloading. There we go. Oh wow, beautiful.
So basically, what you're seeing there symbolically is it's the eyes. The eyes themselves, of course, cross between the chasm or the chiasm. Those go in opposite directions. So the right goes to the left, and the left eye goes to the right in terms of the optic nerve, and it crosses over at the chiasm, which creates an X. But as well, you see that within the Splendor Solace Plate 5, but you also see the mining between two sides. So basically, the mine is the mind. We have been mined of gold, which is established from the supernova. It's the continual cycles of putrefaction and coagulation, Solway and coagula. And moreover, the two sides themselves are the checkerboard. It's the Boaz and Yakin. Remember, Boaz means strength or severity, and Yakin means to establish. So it's the same as the Putra and Factio. It's basically the lunar gates. The lunar gates maintains the regulatory momentum and flow of that Solway and coagula, dissolution and coagulation. And then, of course, all of the various stages in between within the alchemical process. So, yeah.
Let me grab that image for you. This Ubuntu hides my images from me. I actually have to save it as is. I don't know if you use Linux. I'm not really a master of these systems, but I use Linux for all of my podcasting because it's more secure, isn't it?
using a Unix code. So this was that image. You know what I'm seeing there? I'm seeing what looks like Rupus Nigra. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes.
The ancient myth of Meru, which they now relate to Kailash, but it's an old story, allegory of the central pivot, the axis mundi, if you will.
Well, it's the Samudra Manthana as well. It's that same notion of the back and forth, isn't it? Using Mount Meru, I think it was Mount Meru, as the churner of the Milk Ocean, or the Milky Way, of course. Yeah.
Are these two giants that we see here eating away at the mountain?
Again, I've always thought that is a potential. You even see it's very. Sometimes you miss it. You see the moon as well, right at the bottom.
Yeah.
In the still ocean. Now,
the moon is there, like a boat.
Yeah, like a boat. But the boat is the ego, and of course the bank. The bank is where the mined gold. We're on the river bank here, in this plate, and the bank is where the mined gold is stored. So, I mean, of course, I mean the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, as the statement goes, right? But yeah, you also see in the foreground, by the way, to the left. Do you notice? So you have in the right to the left-hand side, you have that winding road, but right at the end, it reaches the winding road, and you see the sort of yellow road. Again, this is the Wizard of Oz, the Yellow Brick Road. The author, I forget the author of the Wizard of Oz, but he was a follower of Blavatsky. He was also an occultist in his own right. He was a student of the occult, so that entire thing is obviously based upon that. But jump in.
This image is interesting because it almost you could say that this is. The two towers, Jochin and Boaz, are here, right, on the right-hand side. So, technically speaking, you would be standing on the right-hand side, 45 degrees down, yeah? Almost between sort of the bottom right corner, if it was a square, almost, right? And you would be looking at that mountain, and it would be your east, because you're always looking through these two pillars towards the east. That's the reference. And there would be the sun in the background, and we can see it looks like the sun is rising. The new order, the new world, the new dawn, right? The dawning of a new day. We see this repeatedly. The dawning of the new day, there's this little mountain in the way of the dawning of a new day, isn't there? And it's almost like you've got Araman and Lucifer here eating away at the mountain of this world, this axis mundi, in order to get it out of the way so that the new day can dawn, and that we're looking at this now through a window which is showing us the sun in the background. But if you're standing between those two pillars, you can't see the sun because it's hidden by the world. So the sun then represents metaphorically the false sun, right?
Yes,
the black
exactly.
sun.
Yeah, and of course that links with the artificial spirit. The artificial spirit is what this system seeks for you to identify as. This is why identitarianism is so prevalent nowadays, because they want you to become completely artificial. The food is fake. God, even some of the jobs are completely fake. We saw that during the Corona event, where half of the population, more than half, of course, at one point it was probably 90% were not working. These sort of managerialist bureaucratic positions, and yet the system functioned almost normatively, right? Without hiccup. So you've got a fake economy, the money is fake, it's not tied to any sort of value, even an artificial value, born of a sort of human confidence in it. I mean, that's starting to wane as well. There's another thing I was just going to mention really quickly. We see Elon Musk, and you talked about the new day. Elon Musk keeps talking about that we're going to Mars and the sun is going to destroy the Earth. Now, that is all symbolic. It's the same idea as Mars, Aries. We need to go to Mars or Aries. We need to go to the new day. We need to get beyond the dark winter, the dark night of the soul, the wintry abode of Aquarius and Capricorn and Pisces even. And we have to emerge within Aries, the new day. This is why you see in the Hierophant as well, he's pointing to his three-layered cross is pointing leftwards to our left, of course, leftwards to Aries on the column at the top, and then, or the sign of Aries, and then of course he's pointing with two fingers, his index and middle finger, up to Aries on the right hand side as well, in the top of that column. It's because ultimately that is what they're, yeah, as you can see there. And of course, what does that look like? It looks like the womb. And the womb, and we were talking about, I don't know if we got into this, the world, which is the world, you know, that which makes a frenzy and disrupts that of the still ocean. It creates the standing waves upon the still ocean. And of course, we're born into this world through the wormhole, through the fallopian tube, and that links with this notion of the toroidal moment, or literally the toroid itself, the storm, and the eye of the storm, and things such as that. You see that of the fruit of, within the analogy of the fruit of Eden, right? The apple of Eden. If you look at that, it looks very much like a toroidal field, an electromagnetic field produced by dipolarity. And of course, this is exactly what the hexagram indicates, with the upper and the lower, the feminine and the masculine, the generative and limitable aspects, and that is the negative and positive charges. So you mentioned as well, Noble, see, this is the thing. From our view, that which we would consider disorder, from the perspective of the gods, would be considered order, or from what we would consider as destructive or negative, from the perspective of the gods, which is the inverse, right? Because again, like what we were seeing in that plate, the sun itself saw the lower minor in yellow to the left, but we would see it to the right, and then vice versa. If the minor that was slightly, elevated and in black, we saw it on our left, but it sees it on the right. So essentially, what you're seeing there is, from the point of view of the sun or Saturn or the gods, that which produces disorder is that which literally creates the loosh, or again, like we do when we're harvesting a crop. When you harvest a crop, what do you have to do? You have to take the scythe and you have to cut it. You have to destroy it. And then you have to literally go through a process where you separate the wheat from the chaff to get what you need from that husk of the grain. It's the same idea. So from the perspective of the crop, it is being destroyed, it's disorder. But from the perspective of the farmer, he has brought the crop to ripeness. He has produced it, established it, and now he seeks to destroy it, and through that establish his own sustenance and his own profit mechanism. So ultimately, that's what you're seeing. It's this sort of heaven and earth inversion, from a sort of law of perspective, if you will, a law of alchemical perspective. Yeah.
So, okay, beautiful. Thank you, Silas. Okay, I can jump off there. So, makes sense. So as we identify, not as the crop, but as we identify as the gods, I think you caught me, right? So you caught me as begging the question of like perspective. right? And so, yes, of course, if I'm the crop, I'm going to be quite frustrated. But if I identify as the God, then yeah, not so much maybe. Yeah, I wanted to point out the Paramount Pictures logo. I think if you were to pull that up, you'd see that it's almost it's with a great deal of precision, very similar to the image that you just had up on the screen. Have you seen that?
Just to add really quickly on that point of perspective as well, Noble, the Corona event in 2020, again, we didn't identify with the crop. So therefore, we saw that as almost a liberating experience. We loosened the loose shackles that we see within the Devil Tarot card. We loosened them from ourselves, and we were no longer spiritually naked. Of course, the inverse was true on the other side.
Yeah, there it is, Rupus Negra.
Yeah, there's in some of the other ones you can see the sunrise. Yep, up and just as you pointed out, actually, there's some other ones that they're not the. There's some other versions of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm seeing one with the sunrise in the background.
Yeah, on the left there, bottom left.
It also appears as well that the sun is at twilight, if I'm not mistaken, because obviously it's to our west. Am I mistaken there? It appears to be at twilight. How many stars are there as well? That's also yeah.
Should be 22, I think, or 23. Pairs of chromosomes, relationships between the pairs of chromosomes. The original 22 music scale of the music before they removed the 10 semitones. To this day, Raga still uses it. The 22 original Phoenician characters that became Paleo-Hebrew, that became basically Greek, Latin, most of the languages that we use today. And
I'm counting 21. It might be 22, but that
is it 21?
If it is 21, it links with that idea or that notion of the World Tarot card. And if it is the West, again, we are in the quote West.
But hold on, can you see the other star in the picture there behind? The sun.
Oh, the sun, yes, God, yeah. Which is the fool, yes. Which is the sense of motion, the clock. God, Franklin, I tell you, you're on the ball today.
It's a beautiful image though as well, isn't it? It looks like it's the Himalayas, and you climb up there and you see the Himalayas. Wow, it's like everybody should go to the Himalayas at least 10 times. Go up there and experience you've never felt such peace before in your life till you climb up on top of a high altitude place and listen to what silence actually sounds like. It's quite a head trip. But this is obviously what they're schooling us towards, isn't it? And those stars, I think, also represent... can you notice how those stars are all dark? Like the numbing of our will. Yeah? The loss of agency, in a sense. And it's interesting how what we're seeing here is we're seeing the play of shadow and dark on the mountain, right? And I'm pretty sure this represents Rupus Negra, or the or they're all the same story. This is also another way to represent the world tree. So Yggdrasil could also be represented in the same way as this, which could also be the axis mundi idea, which is what a totem is, which you dance around. And I think like when we start to look at what they've got planned, it seems very clear, it's very clear this transhumanist agenda that we can see, just to bring it back to the actualizing what's going on in the world.
this transhumanist agenda seems to be very much about the loss of agency. Don't you find it strange that everything's being done for us, right? Like, I'm not used to doing maths in my head because I've got AI calculators doing all the maths for me, right? And so when I actually have to sit and like look at the number squares and do the maths in my head's like, oh, I haven't been doing this as much as I used to. You know, there's something quite powerful about doing things, about using your hands, you know, go and plant the seeds yourself, look after the garden bed yourself, do the work yourself. And now we're being schooled into everything gets done for us, to the point where we're losing our ability. We're totally reliant upon the system. Most people wouldn't even know how to grow a food, when to plant seeds, how to look after the seeds, how not to overwater, when to water, when to, you know, put the potassium into the pot plant or into the garden bed, and how to store. I mean, it's even getting to the point where the younger generation, they're losing the ability to cook, right? Because Uber Eats and all of this is taking over the world. So it's just becoming a world of convenience where everything's just on tap.
Yeah.
Electricity's just there. You hit the button. In the old days, we had to do things. We had to do more physical things. And it's just getting more and more to the point where even podcasters, this is an issue that I have with AI. I've noticed a lot of these podcasters, and I mean, no disrespect to Chance and the Universe crew, but I've noticed they're producing these AI shorts, which are like AI script, AI music, AI images, and I can't even watch it. It does my head in because my conscience is going, the more you push this algorithm for AI, the more YouTube will acknowledge that we want AI, and the more the algorithm will start to push AI on us, and actual podcasters will be left in the past.
Well, you
and
can't
AI
even...
will become the future, music, art, everything. And it seems to take away our own agency. In the old days, we were like artists. We were making things. Now, people have an AI do it for them, and they think that they made it, right?
And that's the problem with the consumeristic system. Again, all of these things begin with con, right? Which is, I believe it's a prefix as well. It means all things. But the consumption and the consumeristic lifestyle, where they want everything conveniently, rapidly in real time, essentially the entire artificial intelligence churning out of content rapidly, and its ability to do so, essentially it sort of plays itself well to that. And of course, artificial intelligence, it's in the name. If you're sapping the intelligence from the real intelligence, if you will, from the human population, then of course you need something that's artificial to fill the vacuum, which of course artificial intelligence seems to be prefigured to take on that role. You know, do you have anything to mention on that, Noble?
Just before we go off this, I just want to add this lush word. I just want to share this with you. This word keeps coming up. So what is lush? So Lu in ancient Egyptian is known as a symbol that is like lotus, Padme, and it's associated with rebirth and creation, right? And Lu, meaning pearl, which in Sumerian was the name of humans that were created, the rebirth of the gods.
Do you know what's interesting about that, Franklin? Sorry about the interjection, but the pearl. If you look at the Menu film, which I think came out in 2022, it's not about food at all. Of course, like this idea of the food of the gods, it's similar to that, but it's very Gnostically inspired. If you can understand the deeper subtext of it, and the main character's name, and it's a fake name that she goes by, which is interesting as well, is Margot, And what does Margot mean but peril? I just synchronistic, man.
Interesting. Pearl and peril. There's something in that, and that's the moon. Pearl is the moon, right? The lunar stone, and the moon represents the pearl and the peril, the life and the death. And then the other part, which is Esh, right? Or Aish, or Esh. Esh also relates to fire. So as fire relates to this, it relates to life, right? So the word that relates to that is bread. And so bread is Aish in Egyptian, Arabic literally translates to life. And bread is related to life because it's our sustenance. Bread obviously is something that is made out of the Saturnal yield of the crop. So when you go Lu, meaning rebirth and creation, right? And Aish, meaning life. So Luish, meaning the rebirth and the creation of life, lush. And we can see this word keeps popping up. I just had to throw that in. Yeah, brother, noble intent. What are your
Perfect.
thoughts?
No, that's beautiful. Actually, perfect timing, and that may help allow me to put forth my question with a little bit more clarity. So, tagging up with the question that I had from before, which is this idea, and by the way, Silas and both of you, I think, addressed this appropriately, but playing around with this idea of us humans having agency and it being stripped away. And when I think of agency, it means agency in the unfolding of one's life, in the authorship of one's life. We have agency over that. And can be suggested that there's a co-creation process, and we could spend lots of time talking about and going down that particular thread. And so within these great cycles that we've been discussing today, and the great year, and this idea that perhaps we're at the end, and there's going to be the great reset, and the slate is going to be wiped clean, so to speak. But within these cycles, it seems to me that the agency of manifestation is important, right? It's like, and clearly, and we were talking about this the other day, Silas, on the Discord server, right? It seems like the agency is important. In other words, the human being has this divine spark within us. Seemingly, we can make some arguments that it is at least partially responsible for the unfolding of reality, right? And there's various Paramount Pictures, for example, has captured our attention. It's captured our awareness through its visual sights and sounds, and its various apparatus that it has available to us. It is captivated the human being in order, and ultimately that capturing, they've been able to inform our perception, right? And as they can inform our perception, as they can start to take a hold of our agency, they inform our perception. That, of course, takes that is the formation by which we create belief, and as we create belief, ultimately that dictates our actions. All that being said, is to suggest that we have agency in the unfolding of our experience. And so if I can get a hold of that one's perception, or a community's perception, or a cultural perception, or the world's perception, then I can dictate how things unfold in this particular reality. Well, if I understand that, whereas that might be cool for a while, that ultimately there's an endpoint, right? Why go through the damn exercise, right? Is it so that I can, I don't know, have a good time for now, right? Is it so that I can, while I'm I'm not sure if you know where I'm going with this, but if it's a foregone conclusion that this is one big perpetual cycle, why go through the effort? Is it have something to do with Steiner said? Is it Silas, you were mentioned the other day on the server, something to the effect of the exit, like this ability. Like I have this notion, in particular, given these types of conversations and being with the likes of you guys, is this need to exit this hamster wheel, right? It's like, okay, yeah, you guys had me at hello. I'm with you. I can see the cycles of the sun. I can see the cycles of the moon. I can see the cycles, the great cycles. I can extrapolate out and head nod with you. Yeah, you're probably right. This thing's gonna die, right? The sun dies in the west every evening, and it arises in the east every morning, and so therefore it stands to reason. And as we as above, so below, that ultimately that we're going to go through a great reset. Well, I think some of us are ready to consider the secret passage, right? The exit. And so I'm curious, after all that being said, is how does your understanding of what's going on, or your well studied and learned understanding of what's going on in this realm, inform you as a human? Like, other than the fact that we're discussing this now and hopefully some people are getting some benefit from this, what do you make of it? What are you going to do with it? How does this inform your malicious action?
I think morality.
Yeah, jump in, Frank. Yeah.
Yeah, I always think it's got to do with morality, because the ray, set. Okay, so ray and set are the two polarities of the sun, and the rising of the sun, life force, prana, and set represents the setting of the sun, right? So reset literally means the sun and set, ra and set, ray and set, reset. So I think these polarities are about good and evil in a proverbial sense, about doing things that support life, promote life, or doing things that take away from life. Right? And so there's this agency of corrosion in the universe, entropy, and then there's this anentropic agency of the sun producing life and producing matter. And there's this constant balance, but I think that we choose which side of the fence that we sit on. And by the choice and the virtue of our agency, depending on which side of the fence that we sit on, depends. Imagine a circle that does this, right? Now, this is a figure of 8 that's either going to go there, or this is a figure of 8 that's either going to go there. So we're choosing whether or not we are going to, in this sphere, we're either going to go there or there, right? We're either going to go closer towards the life-giving principle or closer towards the life-taking principle. And the life-taking principle is a loss of agency and a loss of free will. That's the 8th sphere. But in the process of the 8th sphere, as a breakaway sphere, it opens us also towards a more divine sphere. And I think that this is our choice in what we take from this particular rotation of the sun and the moon, is we either go one side or the other. I think it's a highly polarizing thing. And so we either choose to become a part of the life-giving principle or the life-taking principle. And based upon that, will dictate, and the moral compass and the ethics probably being a bad word because it's something that's been schooled into our brains, but eth representing Aleph and Tav. Et is the first of the 22, Tav is the last of the 22, and together they represent the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning. So the eth is the full spectrum of potential. Ethics is how we navigate the 22 paths, the 22 major arcana, how we navigate that journey of the fool towards liberation. And the final step in the journey of the fool is agency. That's the magician card. So we're moving towards free will and agency. So we're either moving towards free will, which is life, or we're moving away from free will, which is the opposite of life. And I think that's our choice. What do you think?
Yeah, I would frame it differently, but ultimately I would say the premise is agency. Fundamentally, it's so from a physical perspective, you need to understand the environment in which you live, because the environment in which you live, to some degree, and again, it depends on who you are or where you are, or of what context you are residing within situationally. It dictates how your life goes. Now, like any wave when you're surfing it, do you either control yourself on the board and actually surf that wave, thus a sort of in an allegorical sense assert your agency over the wave, or do you allow the wave to simply just tumultuously drown you? So ultimately what it is it's about reclaiming human agency, not within the system, not even within our own minds. It's actually it's establishing something greater than the sum of the parts in which we reside within. So it's about ultimately for me, it's about trying to find a way to end the cycle of suffering. It's it's a fairly it's the holy grail. It's a fairly auspicious and ambitious rather undertaking, but fundamentally it's this question: human agency. Why does human agency have to falter during each stage of the cycle of the death and rebirth of the sun, both microcosmically, macrocosmically, cyclically? Why does that have to occur? Is there any way in which we can realize the truth that lies beyond the perforated veil, right? Realize that absolute fundamental primordial essence from which we derived from. We know so because we live within a world that is mathematically, mechanistically formulated in a very malefic and predatory manner, and done so in a way that almost it's akin to a camera obscura. It is a world in which it is myopically funneled from that which is higher, and it is funneled into the dark cave, and upon that dark cave we experience an inverted reality. So it's about taking control of reality, not in a militant sense like what we see with the biodigital convergence and these architects of the Internet of all things, but in a way that seeks to find God, not out there, but within ourselves. And this is another thing the Hierophant, I guess, ritualistically, should we say, ritualistically symbolizes, which is religion. What is religion? Well, it comes from the Latin term religio, where we get our term ligature from, which it means to bind something, to bind the mind. Basically, it's like everything in this world, it's the consumeristic, artificial representation to psychically funnel us adrift from the true middle path to heaven, to take us off the yellow brick road, should we say, and to funnel us down these dead-end roads, right, where it gives us an artificial sense of God from books, from the artificial, which literally means the man-made. But it
officially
stops short.
Art.
Yes, officially it's art, yeah. But it stops short at the true, the true essence of it. Because remember, all lies, like the amniotic fluid of water, mercury, the world egg, the fetus, and the womb. Again, the storm surrounds us. Surrounds the eye. It surrounds the peaceful, true eye of the storm, which is the originating point of all things. at least extant within the storm. So the truth will always be at the nucleus of the lie. That's why you have to traverse the lie to understand the truth. And this gets to the deeper aspect of what I think's going on here. I'm of the opinion, again, it's just my opinion, a sort of hunch. Again, I would change it if evidence sort of, pushed me in that direction. That like this world or this system, this entire cosmos is a sum of shadows. Then in the same sense, the shadows were formulated because that which originated the shadow, the light, if you will, it sought to project itself in its lower, you could say, oppositional aspect to thus like what you see with the paramount and the contours of the light dancing in a sort of divine ballet with the light and the shadow, to know of itself by knowing of the particulars. This is what you see in the Splendor Solace as well. We shall pierce or penetrate, mentally, the to know of the particulars, to thus understand the universal way. You must understand the particulars of yourself. This is the same idea as the planetary genus, or genii rather. All of the planets, all of the archetypes, formulate the mosaic of your psyche. To understand each of them is to understand the universal essence which makes up you, which is the fractalized, fragmentary aspect of God. It is a thread, I guess you could say an autonomic thread of, or a quantum thread of that divine source which produces all other threads. This is why all of us, we all have the same common delusion of the world. We all have the same common delusion of the present moment. Obviously, our perceptions are completely different of it, right? Again, one of us might be ill, the other might be completely of health. One of us might be in a bad mood, the other may be in a good mood, right? But ultimately, what we're perceiving is the same. Again, because we're humans, right? We are each a hue of that divine light. We're each a thread of it. To combine all the threads to understand the mosaic, the contours of the shadows of the mountain, if you will, is to climb that fatalistic slope like the Capricorn, this Capricornian sea goat, the Saturn, the sort of chimeric essence of Saturn. We come from the abyss as a beast of the abyss, the fish, and we climb that fatal slope up to heaven. It's basically tracing the thread, the divine thread, back to the source. Ultimately, that's it. And what do we get at the end of that dangerous and intrepid journey, the fool's journey, the heroic fool's journey? At the end of that, we understand who we are, what the world is, and we understand that the macrocosm is merely a reflection of the microcosm, and that the knowledge of the environment itself ultimately informs us of our own self. So it's about knowledge. Knowledge is power, but it's also emancipatory.
Yeah, I think, when we look at the Fool, it's really interesting. When I look at what the Fool represents, to me on a personal level, I see all of their mythos, and they all come back to the idea. Okay, so Shiva surrenders to Mahakali and prostrates at Shakti, and you see this surrender seems to be a big theme, and it seems to be a sure ender, surrender of the patterns and cycles of conditioning that keep us stuck. And then the question of like, okay, so what surrender what? We don't want to surrender our agency, but we want to surrender our desire, personal desire.
And when we surrender personal desire, we start to become empathic. So, it starts off with being true to the self, right? Number one, the journey of who myself, of being, what's the word? We said it earlier, when you are being expressive of your inner nature and you are allowing that singularity of me to become fundamental.
The flow
There's
state.
Ethics involved in it. Sorry?
The flow state.
Yeah, but I mean specifically relating to the number one, where the number one is really about going into the ego and expressing the ego as it is. This then causes us to have to recognize the other, right? And when we recognize the other, that's the sensitivity and the ego. And then when we realize, by recognizing the other, that there is an inspiration to be found in the other, that brings a sense of optimism and a sense of positivity and an expansiveness of consciousness, which then causes us to want to create this structure. And this structure then produces the intellectual ability to bring agency to the sensitivity of empathy in order to bring it to the artistry of 6, which represents also service, karma yoga. And so that service is to humanity. And that service, when we start to give back of ourselves and we start to think about the other people. You walk past the person in the street that's hungry and your heart goes, wow, this person's got nothing. You think to yourself, like, what can I give them? And so that's a sacrifice. That's a surrendering your substance, right? Surrendering your own personal desire here, but I want to do this. I'd like to do this. Well, I need to do something for this person. And then that sacrifice, that surrender of putting the leader of me on the stage of what I desire and what I want, puts us into perspective, and that brings that harmony of 6 into play, and that brings us into that I'm going to do something for other people to help. And that drives the mystic within us. The more we do this in the physical plane, the more that inner mystic starts to become recognized, because now we're actually looking at the world through open eyes, and we're realizing like all of these things in the world are really just about people. And then that becomes an inner journey towards understanding what makes me tick, because I'm seeing another human being suffering. And by engaging with another human being and not being afraid to see their suffering and being prepared to go into their suffering and to do what I can to help their suffering, my suffering then becomes something that I'm observing and dismantling in that process of the mystic, going into myself. And that then brings about agency, because then I'm gaining powers over my own demons. And that then causes us to want to work, that karma yoga. We want to go out and do more things in the world that's going to make the world better. And that drives us towards altruism. And that altruism reveals to us the true humanitarian impulse of the activist, which then makes us want to go into the world and make the world a better place. So I think like you say, agency is the key. And I think like the real agency that we have is towards surrendering our own desires for what we want for ourselves, and starting to look at the bigger picture, the world we're in, and what is best. Sort of like I'm a father, and I've got to think about what's best for my son, not what's best for me, not what I like what's best for him. And so I've got to make certain sacrifices and certain in what I do because it's better for him. And when we start thinking like that about all the people around us, the more we expand that influence of that feeling, I think the closer we get to that harmony within ourselves, the closer that hexagram of being gets aligned, and all 6 of the planetary influences can dance comfortably around the sun. And that brings that harmony that will bring out all of these positive potentials of the mystic, and all of those 7 potentials which represents, victory over the self. And that victory over the self then becomes the fuel that will drive us further and deeper into understanding why we're here, because we then realize we're here part of a chain of life, we're part of a group, and what happens to the one is going to affect everybody else. And that binding is what the church was supposed to be. That binding was what religion was supposed to be. Not just a negative binding of binding us to slavery, but binding us to each other, binding us all to a cause that's greater than ourselves, a cause that isn't just about what we can get, but what we can give. But giving in terms of true agency, not to an organization, not to a power, not to a office, but giving,
not to an enterprise of the Kirk. Sorry, I had to make the joke. I couldn't resist. Sorry, Franklin. Please continue.
No, absolutely. I got a little dog here, but I think like this is where we lose the thing on the spiritual path. And going to India was such a wake up call for me, man. Such a wake up call. There are so many people out there that have nothing. And I'm sure you've come across this too, right?
Yes. Yeah.
You go to India and it's so bloody humbling. You see a lot of people and you think like, wow, you want to like, you have to help some people. You have to do what you can. And you realize, you see viscerally what's wrong in the world. It's not an intellectual thing. It's a heart, visceral experience that you carry with you. And it brings tears to your eyes. And those tears that brings to the eyes, a tear is a star. You play with that word, tear, star, steer. So it brings these tears to the eyes that will purify our vision and enhance our ability to see ourselves more closely. And I think that this is what's missing. This is what they don't want us to do. They want us to live behind our walls, behind our doors, behind our screens. They don't want us talking to each other. They don't want us helping each other. They don't want us trading with each other. They want us using their money. They want us, there's something very beautiful about the Arabic culture when you go out to Muslim countries that I've noticed. Gosh, like, for example, we like to knock it in the West, but when a husband of a household passes away, the local community look after the children and the wife. It's their responsibility. It's their duty.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's just this common dignity and decency that in the West we've lost. Yeah. If one of our neighbors is going through a hard time, we probably won't even know because we don't even know who they are. But in the old days, we would get together and we would help each other. And I think that's like really, like in my impression, that's what this agency can be used for. And when we use our agency for that, nothing can touch us.
I agree. There was something. There was a question I wanted to pose to you, Noble. It was asked by Gondola, or it was the question was thought of by him. He mentioned that I should ask you, could you speak about how the Archons invade our minds and keep us creating the same suffering events over and over to feed off of our louche energy? Do you have any thoughts upon that?
Yeah, well, by Archons, he's referring to perhaps the celestial bodies, the gods. Most certainly. In fact, there's a number of things that I wanted to reply to. Can I get to that in a moment?
Yeah, cool.
Yeah. Today, I saw that the Don is visiting Saudi Arabia, right? And Saudi Arabia has announced their AI program. And the name of it is Humane, with the AI so HUMAIN, Humane. And I guess if I was to answer my own question, and thank you both very much for articulating a challenging question, frankly. We're doing our level best here. to retain our agency, but it seems to retain our humanity, right? The spanda is alive within me as we come through our 3.3 hours, right? We're almost at the 33 mark, right? And we were kind of talking about the what now, and how do we, to me, yes, Brother Franklin, it's to retain our humanity. It's just to embrace those who need embracing. It's to serve others as if they were ourselves, and it's like we retain at this moment our agency to do so, and our conscious awareness around on this is should fuel us, and it sounds like it's fueling you, and it's fueling me to do that very thing. It's do unto others as we would expect to be done to us. And so, sometimes we've been using so much symbology and so much imagery today, and as an astrologer, an aspiring astrologer, there's the circle, right? It's the zodiac, the cyclical nature of this. Sometimes I have to admit, I get a little bit more excited about the tree, the tree as represented by the human body, kind of the chakras, right? And I just dawned on me the linear nature of that, the vertical linear nature of that, and I spent so much time lately thinking about the cycles, and we've been talking about the cycles, the great cycles and whatnot. Sometimes I see when I'm fantasizing, it's just like this idea of being in our virtue, like in the heart, in these higher chakras, in these higher energy centers. It gives me, seemingly it gives me a like more purpose, or almost something to strive for, right? And so I really kind of grown to like the tree of life glyph and the chakra system, the human as sits in the tree of life, because I can understand that in this realm there's a density, in down in our root chakra, where we're concerned with safety and security and other things and sustenance, and it's we're down in the density and we're grounded into our root. And then of course we get into our desire in the second chakra, and the will in the third. And it's this guy's been working for 50 years to try to spend more time up in that heart chakra, right, and anahata, and then really getting glimpses of that which is above of that. And of course on the tree of life, you guys are students, if I sit, and perhaps masters of that. And ultimately we talk about the tarot and returning back to the magician and where that agency is, and the kundalini coming up from this malkuth, down from from this density, from this world, and rising back up the tree to reemerge with that from which we came, or perhaps, which I like in a little bit the way that I like to think about it, and actually, Franklin, brother, you sharing the figure eight. Of course, oftentimes I'm thinking of the figure eight on a horizontal, like the infinity symbol. And then as you just, in fact, the other day, my question to you in Pantheon, right, was just talking about the figure eight, right? And I was, in my mind, somehow I had it as on its side, right? Horizontal. And so the way that you basically demonstrated the figure eight, right? And kind of the good versus evil was vertical. And essentially there's that spiral up. It's that movement up, that movement up into our virtue, up from the density of materiality into the lightness of that which is higher. And that's where I'm heading. That's what excites me is, and in order to do that, I've come to realize that I have to be less bound to the density of this earth. And so there's so many good reasons to ground and center and balanced in this earth and cherish this embodiment and live this life. And I'm not suggesting, I hope you don't get the idea that I really want to like exit like the stage altogether. No, I'm having fun. I'm having fun with you guys. I found you, right? I mean, we're talking about the things I want to talk about. Finally, we got, we're here, guys, we're here. And so it's just so exciting to me to know that, that as I step into my virtue, as we step into our virtue, we can climb the ladder, right? Jacob's ladder. We can go up those 33 vertebrae and we can become fully realized, and we can, and so I guess going back to the question that was proposed by the one of the viewers there, I missed that one. Is are we influenced or bound by the what was it? The archons.
Archons, yeah.
Yeah. I do think in this incarnation, yes, I do. I believe that we were influenced by the macro, and that which I associate with the archons or with the luminaries. Yes, I absolutely think that we've arrived individually. We arrived into our respective environments as a result of the sum total of our malicious action in our previous incarnations, and that Silas, Franklin, the three of us arrived in the environment that was related to our karma, basically. And so, yeah, environment does matter. There's no doubt about that. And so do I think that we're influenced then by the transiting of the real-time clock against our natal chart? I absolutely do. In this realm of density, in fact, I spent the whole 5 hours with you on Saturday, Franklin, articulating that very thing. Is yes, we are influenced greatly by the macrocosm, but that said, I think we can transcend it. I personally believe, and I'm willing to change my beliefs, is that the entirety of the manifestation that we're talking about and experiencing, brushing up against Saturn at the boundary of the visual boundary that we can see, is a system, and that we can transcend it. I don't know how quite yet. You guys are giving me some clues. The yamas and the niyamas, and maintaining one's virtue, I think is super important. And for me, that means helping my brothers and sisters when they're down, and using the abundance, the agency, but the stewardship over the abundance that has been granted to me, and dare I say to you guys, to do that very thing. And then as we do that, yes, we will sublimate this density, and we will transcend. We transmute and transcend, ultimately, perhaps to a less dense place where these forces that we're discussing have less sway on us, less of a hold. And so, yeah, I think I'll stop there for now.
Yeah, I think the archons, when we talk about them, they're like a fascinating topic in itself. I mean, we're using the word which comes from Greece, right? But the idea of the archons, like you see it well represented in the orders that were created by Yael the Ba'ot in his orchestration of separating from his body agencies that would rule over agencies that would rule over. And so we're talking the hierarchies. And often when we speak about the archons, we're speaking about the klipot specifically, right? So now I always relate the archons specifically to those beings from the Saturn age that Steiner is talking about, which relate to those rulers, those rulerships from a bygone era, but that have agency to interact with us through this continuum, this reality sphere that we're in, which I believe is a constructed Maya layer over another constructed universe. Hence, we live in the past to a certain extent here. I mean, just think about how the brain has to process all of this information in order to construct the physical reality, when we're actually in an extra dimensional state, experiencing reality before our brains can process it through the electrical impulse field and the hormonal states. It's an interesting concept. Consciousness, we are already here. When we step outside of our bodies, if we go into the etheric field, we notice time is compressed differently. When we come into our body, time seems like it's moving so fast. When we go out of our one of the things when you train in martial arts is learning how to extract your consciousness from the surroundings and put it into one point. And when you extract your consciousness from the surroundings and you put it into one point, that focus puts you into an etheric state of consciousness where time moves differently. So you've got extra agency, which means that you're in a different time zone to your opponent. So your opponent is, if you're doing it properly, one step behind you all the time, because you are seeing what's coming before it's coming. So you go into a pre-sentient state of consciousness, which is seemingly supernatural, but it's just super than this natural, because this physical meat puppet natural is just an extension of your chi field. And so in that chi field, when you allow your consciousness to rest there, you're able to see the flows of the prana that will become the changes in the physical before the physical's actually reacted to the changes. And so you're on that level of energy, you're one step ahead of what's actually happening on the physical. So I think like basically, and I'm getting sort of convoluted here, I think the whole interesting notion of this archonic potential is they're interacting with us on an extra dimensional level. So they're actually affecting the very thoughts that we think. And my experience, and I've got extensive experience with all sorts of non-physical beings ever since I drowned, and which was 78. So they change when we enter into that moment that I'm talking about. I've explained this all in conversations with Jeremy. It's in my thing if you're interested. But to put it a long story short, I've also died since I've been an adult, but not physically. It sounds weird, but to be trapped somewhere else for what seems like months of my life, when my body's in Padmasana, in lotus posture, and I'm pretty sure that I'm done, and I'm accepting that and I have to go through this abyss, and I have to go and face this archonic horde. And in that moment, the thing that I discovered was compassion. That's like the most powerful force in the whole universe, because that realigns everything. And that realigns the archonic. So these archonic beings can only interact with us if we choose. They can reverse back to their natural life force giving. So depending on our influence, the same reality can show us this, or the same reality can show us this. And it's got to do with our perspective. Like the reality is like a feedback loop of our consciousness field.
You're viewing the one source like a tree from different angles, essentially.
Yeah, it depends on what's in our heart as to what the tree is going to show us. And so these archonic fields that are these things like overlording over us can become helping agents that are positive when we align our hearts with that higher frequency. And that compassion is like it's when you take the passion, which is what fuels your desire, and it's passion is what passes ions. So we've got like an ionic nature, and we pass ions. It's like we're talking electrical here, electromagnetic. Ida and the Pingala
the electrical field, the magnetic field. So these ions also happen to pass through our blood. The red blood corpuscles rub against each other to generate these ionic bonds and forces, electrical forces in the body. And obviously the white blood cells are expressing these ionic potentials to maintain the system. And so this is also a psychic thing. This is happening on the psychic field, and as the psychic field is happening, it's reflecting it into the body as above, so below. So these two principles of the red and white blood fields in our body is also being reflected in the Ida and the Pingala as our hormonal system and as our central nervous system. And so and obviously our pineal gland manages the central nervous system in the same way that our pituitary gland manages the hormonal system. So our moods and our thoughts are like two pedals of a bicycle, but they are fundamentally driven by the mood. So that mood is based upon our feelings and our love. And so when we have that in our consciousness, we literally anthropomorphize the universe, but it's not just a metaphor. We literally anthropomorphize the universe. Literally, like this entire universe is like a glue of substance, which is a projection of our own consciousness field through which we are manifesting ourselves, our bodies, and space and time, because this entire space-time continuum is really just a Maya that's experienced in our consciousness and then manifested through these onion layers of being in order to become a physical manifestation, though effectively it's all just a spiral of the consciousness field, and this consciousness field is just spiraling outwards towards the peripheral of this toric field, where it becomes atomized, and this atomization we experience as physicality in our body. But the reality of it is it's just consciousness. The entire nature of everything is just consciousness. So we literally have the power to change our state of vibration, and we don't even have to interact with the dark stuff that's happening in the world.
Yeah.
We have to stand against it. We have to stand, but the ways that we can stand against it doesn't necessarily involve having to fight it. Sort of like when there's cold, you don't fight the cold. What are you going to fight the cold for? No, you make a fire. Yeah, just take forget the cold. We're not talking about cold. We just make a fire and enjoy the warmth. Just forget that there was cold. Does that make sense to you guys as a metaphor?
Well, as well, you can only affect your own sense of feeling cold vis-a-vis the fire. You yourself can't become the sun, and because then you'll bring in balance, right? But another thing to mention as well, this idea of cosmopsychism, you're totally on point, and it's this idea, and we really have to understand this, just generally as a society, as a species, that matter is a derivative of consciousness, not the other way around, and consciousness itself is the antecedent monadic seedling of all actualized potentiality. In fact, it probably is potentiality itself. So, the reason we can say it's potentiality and probably not actualized is because we can't actually measure consciousness. Again, like the observer effect, quantum states, the qubit, which is the sort of abstract unit. It's not necessarily a unit; it's more an abstraction of a unit of quantum of a quantum bit. So the qubit itself, as soon as consciousness observes it, it will then undergo a waveform collapse, which essentially is the potentiality being actualized. The pure potential, undifferentiated and unmanifested, being differentiated and manifested. Hence, it turns into a classical bit, a deterministic piece of information. So, yeah, the I am who I am. So basically the quantum is I will be, or I could be, or the possibility of probability. However, the I am who I am is getting more into the deterministic realm, isn't it? And then, of course, the simply the cogito ergo sum, the I am this. Then that is fundamentally the deterministic. So it's that distinction that's being woven in the sort of idea of quantum mechanics, and I mean really the fabric of reality. That's the deeper reality that's going on here. It's the reality that we're experiencing here that's being projected. And to mention as well, these monsters of the demiurge. Fundamentally, the demiurge is merely an expression of our psyche. It's something that protrudes from us, from our consciousness. It's not something that necessarily controls us as much as it is, an essence of us controlling ourselves, undermining ourselves. It's the same way the shadow or the past trauma undermines us. It can behoove us to sublimation of the character, to letting go of the old mental character and perhaps creating a new mental character, or understanding ourselves in a deeper aspect. But it can also lead, of course, to our complete and utter ruination. It can lead us down the path to perdition. So it's that like anything, it's the quantum is the blurring of the lines. It's the probabilistic essence of reality, but it exists within a singularity until consciousness brings it into a determinate binary. Into for example, will I have a good day or a bad day, right? And then the deterministic outgrowth of that. So fundamentally the entire universe is conscious, or it's based upon consciousness, which gets into the idea that perhaps if we are merely aspects of a consciousness, a unitary field of consciousness, then perhaps we are mere, I don't know, unconscious projections of a dreamer. And you get into ideas such as that, right? Which really, I mean, fundamentally, they're speculative questions that are open-ended. You'll never really find an answer to them. But asking the question itself allows you to chart new ground, and to learn new things. I mean, fundamentally, that's why we do what we do. It's not the journey is the destination. The reason behind that is you don't want to find the Holy Grail. You never will. It's about the journey all along the way. You learn more about yourself, more about the world, more about other people, and the reasoning or the value you derive from that is that ultimately you have a deeper sense of who you are, and you can build agency within that. You can take the kindling of suffering or of lush, and you can relight the primal fire that's within the heart. This can make you more creative, more inspired. You can be a better husband, a better wife, a better parent, a better adventurer, whatever you want, a better musician, whatever you want to do. It's about ultimately recapturing what is the essence of life, reframing what is life about, So I mean, fundamentally, that's what the spiritual journey is to me. That's how I view it. Because believe you me, I've had a lot of those questions like, well, why'd you do what you do? You've probably been the same, all of you here, and everyone probably listening. Why'd you look into these questions you can never find the answer to, or be sure of the answer to? Well, it's not really. It's not about the finding of the answer. It's about all of the insights you find along the way. You uncover enough rocks, you sort of you can sort of you exist on the periphery of the truth. You can sort of glimpse it. if you uncover enough rocks along the way, you find enough keys where the threshold to truth becomes fairly obvious, but you can never really truly grasp it in its totality, because ultimately it's beyond all of us. It's ineffable, it's incomprehensible, it's an incommensurate fact of nature and of the very universe in which we reside within, you know. We ourselves are like the water or the mercury. Ultimately, you cannot find the true essence of us. You know, you really can only see that which we reflect. But within the reflection itself, you can sort of trace back that thread to the source. You know, if you look hard enough, you'll find it. But then again, I mean, life is short, you know. You can only really find as much as you can, learn as much as you can, and develop your soul as much as you can. But you know, it's there's a deeper essence at play. It's not just necessarily a value judgment type thing. It's like what you were saying, Franklin, and I think you mentioned it too, Noble. There's a deeper sense that you can't really put into words that you get from, I don't know, being charitable or generous. It's a very human thing, you know. It's, of course, in the wild, the predator, even the prey, wouldn't want to help its competitor, even intra-species, but the human does. The human has that within them, that they want to be charitable, they want to be generous, they want to be altruistic. Because we even see it with, you know, we do the same thing with other animals. It's we can glimpse human beings. I think I'm sure animals can do it too, though they don't communicate it quite in the way we can. We glimpse or we see within these sentient beings something, a common thread that ties us all together, you know, and we know that truth almost innately, but we can't put it into words. Ultimately, that the truth stares us in the face every day. You know, we just can't really put it into words. I mean, this is why we have almost 4-hour discussions trying to describe the indescribable ultimately, right? You know, we get close, but, you know, it's no cigar, as they say. So, yeah. And with that, gentlemen, I'm probably going to have to head off because I'm getting slightly tired. It's 1 o'clock here. It's just turned 1 o'clock. It's the I don't know if this is the witching hour.
It can't be 1 o'clock there. It must be 12 o'clock there.
Oh no, sorry, 12. It is 12 o'clock. That's how tired I am.
Yeah, I've got to go. Like I was thinking that when you said that, I saw stares us in the face. I thought that's my stairwell to dreamland.
The time is literally warping around me. That's how tired I am. I must go sleep and defragment my mind.
You gotta go reset, Silas. Go reset.
Yeah, the great reset, man. Yeah, I've got to go have the great reset. I'm going into the Aquarian land of slumber.
Do you have any last thoughts just before we go? I noticed you, Noble Intent. I saw your head move a few minutes ago. Was there last ideas you wanted to throw on the proverbial grill?
Oh, so Venus, you mentioned Venus earlier. We're talking a little bit about values and virtue, and so she's finishing up her 40-day heroine's journey, right? So yeah, about 40 days, maybe tomorrow, she went retrograde, right? She went back into that which were, you know, she basically went retrograde. Now she's coming back, and she's reaching that point from which she started the retrograde, right? And I just find it interesting. Well, I've learned to pay attention to what's going on in the mundane, right? And we're just having this quite beautiful conversation. Beautiful being the operative word right there. Very Venetian conversation. As the Venus just took her heroine's journey, 40 days in the desert, going underground, right? And she's come up and she's emerged anew, and with new understandings, and it seems she's passing some of those on to us today. And so I'm grateful for that. I very much enjoy speaking with you guys. I am also tired, Silas, keeping up with you guys, and just the boundless scholarship that you guys have put in. It's wow, staying attentive and focused on what you're saying, and it requires a lot of loosh, a lot of juice, man. And but I wouldn't have it any other way. I really do appreciate you guys taking time and doing this with us. So thank you.
I really appreciate you sharing your thoughts as well, man. And I know you probably don't see yourself as such, but you are a very sagacious, erudite, and articulate individual as well. A scholar, I would say. A scholar of the spiritual.
It's an honor being here with both of you guys. Loved it. Totally enjoyed the discussion, the conversation. And we'll have to do this again sometime. Thank you all that have been watching. I hope you guys have had a great time. I hope you got what you came for. Thank you, Silas. Thank you, Rick. Thank you, world. And yeah, to Venus coming back. Oh my gosh, I can feel it. My heart's just like, When Venus goes away, there's something missing. I've got an eagle feather that's finding its way towards me. So 4 days from now, she's going to be with me. A black eagle feather.
It's like the end of Lord of the Rings. The eagles are returning.
Forward. I love eagles. I have a thing with eagles. I've got this thing with eagles. Yeah, you watch them fly. It does something. Big love to everybody. Take it easy. Keep smiling. Keep trying. Keep the good fight. Just keep being yourselves, man. Om Shanti to everybody. Take it easy. Much love.